Since ancient times, the outer gods, known as the absolute beings, reigned supreme. These omnipotent entities were creators of countless universes, weaving existence itself with their boundless power. Their pursuit of eternity was tireless, leading them to forge endless matter, souls, and unbreakable laws. Through these acts of creation, they sought fulfillment, hoping to find meaning in the infinite span of their existence. But their efforts eventually gave way to monotony. The ceaseless cycle of creation and expansion no longer fascinated them. To escape their growing boredom, the absolute beings devised a means to pass time, a brutal and chaotic spectacle. They incited wars among their own creations, observing as worlds clashed and beings fought for survival. The destruction and rebirth that followed these battles became their entertainment. Countless beings perished, only to be revived, as the wars raged on endlessly, feeding the insatiable boredom of their creators. Then an extraordinary event shattered the routine. Amid one of these endless conflicts, an absolute being met an unthinkable fate: death at the hands of one of their own creations. The impossible had occurred, and its implications were staggering. The slain absolute being left behind a world ungoverned, a reality bereft of its master. The remaining absolute beings, hailing from dimensions far and wide, convened to witness this unprecedented phenomenon. They gazed upon the forsaken world, where the power of their fallen comrade now lay unclaimed. Yet instead of grief or outrage over the act of defiance by one of their creations, they felt only a shared hunger, a desire for the untethered power. The betrayal did not matter, only the prize did. With this shared ambition igniting their hearts, the absolute beings resolved to claim the unowned power. This conflict, born from greed and ambition, marked the beginning of the War of Outer Gods, a battle that would forever alter the fabric of existence. The final day of high school was like stepping into a jungle where chaos and emotion filled every corner. Inside a bustling classroom, Sung Suho announced that he had been accepted to the prestigious Korea University of Arts. The announcement sent waves through the room. His classmates couldn't believe it. Whispers and exclamations of shock spread, with many questioning how someone as unassuming as Suho could achieve such a feat. While some celebrated their escape from the grueling years of high school, others struggled with the disappointment of their own failures. As the noise settled slightly, Lee Eun-chul approached Suho. He congratulated Suho on the unexpected achievement, his words tinged with an edge of incredulity. Eun-chul admitted he never knew Suho was so talented, asking since when Suho had become so skilled. Suho turned to face him directly, unbothered by the proximity of the taller student. He addressed Eun-chul with a sly remark, intentionally using the wrong name, referring to him as Kim Song-cheol. Eun-chul's expression hardened. He corrected Suho firmly, stating that his name was Lee Eun-chul. Suho responded nonchalantly, pretending as if the correction didn't matter. Eun-chul's frustration grew, and he blamed Suho for ruining his plan to take over the school. Suho, however, brushed off the accusation with calm confidence, thanking Eun-chul instead. He noted that Eun-chul's antics had actually helped him graduate, an ironic twist that left Eun-chul seething. Nearby, two girls whispered to each other, watching the interaction from a distance. One remarked how childish Eun-chul still acted, even on the day of their graduation. She wondered aloud why he continued to stir trouble when everyone was ready to move on. The other girl nodded in agreement, expressing sympathy for Suho's struggles, especially given his difficult past. Losing both parents and yet still finding the strength to create a brighter future was something they admired, even if others failed to see it. Just then, Eun-chul swung his fist with force, aiming directly at Suho. The tension crackled in the air, but before the punch could land, Suho acted with lightning speed. He grabbed Eun-chul's head and drove his knee sharply into his face. Suho's stance remained firm, his voice calm but commanding as he tried to defuse the situation. Yet before Suho could finish his thought, Eun-chul pushed himself off the ground, his movements fierce and unrelenting. He charged again, but Suho anticipated the attack, moving faster than his opponent could react. A second flying knee connected with Eun-chul's face, sending him staggering back. Blood trickled from Eun-chul's nose, but he didn't falter. Instead, he grinned, an unsettling expression stretching across his face. His posture radiated raw power, and a strange energy seemed to pulse within him. Swinging his fist again, Eun-chul unleashed a powerful strike. But Suho was quicker. He dodged effortlessly, and the punch collided with a nearby locker instead. The sound of the impact was deafening, metal denting under the force. Suho's eyes widened as he processed the sheer strength behind Eun-chul's attack. The two girls watching from a distance were equally stunned, their expressions frozen in shock. Chul himself stared at his fist and the damaged locker, momentarily lost in disbelief. He seemed surprised by his own power, as if something new had awakened within him. Meanwhile, Suho, seated on the floor, observed him intently. The strange, unexplainable energy surrounding Chul left Suho with a growing unease, as if this was only the beginning of something far greater. 2 years later, Sung Suho was now a sophomore in college. He walked down a bustling street, the chatter of people and the hum of city life surrounding him. As he moved through the crowd, something unusual caught his attention. Turning his gaze, he noticed a commotion unfolding around the corner. A group of employees from the Hunter Association stood at the forefront of the gathering crowd, urgently directing people away from the area. They announced that classes in the main building had been relocated to the side building, warning everyone to stay clear. A gate had opened, and hunters were currently engaged in a raid. The employees stressed the danger, urging non-hunters to maintain a safe distance. Among the crowd, a man in a black suit asked how long it had been since the hunters had entered the gate. One of the employees replied that it had been over 8 hours, assuring him that the hunters should be finishing soon, given that it was only a D-rank gate. Despite their reassurances, the tension among the onlookers lingered. Some whispered anxiously about what might happen if the gate wasn't cleared, while others expressed confidence in the hunters' ability to handle the situation. Suho stood silently, observing the scene. His thoughts drifted as he pondered the existence of gates. The world had changed drastically 3 years ago with their sudden emergence. Gates were mysterious passageways into dungeons, where monsters lurked, waiting for their chance to escape and wreak havoc. Humanity, however, had not remained static. In response to the gates, certain people began to awaken extraordinary powers, becoming superhumans capable of wielding mana. These individuals, known as Awakeners, were humanity's answer to the chaos. Despite the fear and uncertainty that followed the Gates' appearance, the disorder was quickly brought under control. An Awakener named Woo Jim Chul founded the Hunter Association, uniting these powerful individuals under one banner. This organization became the backbone of the New World, dividing society into 2 distinct groups: Awakeners, who fought to close the gates, and unawakened civilians, who relied on the Hunters for survival. Suho reflected on this divide. For unawakened people like him, life was a constant struggle. While Awakeners gained wealth and status effortlessly, those without powers worked tirelessly, only to be painfully reminded of the unbridgeable gap between them. Even the weakest Awakeners held an advantage that unawakened civilians could never hope to match. This dependence on hunters was both a source of gratitude and a grim reminder of vulnerability. Without Awakeners, the world would crumble under the weight of the gates and their monstrous inhabitants. Yet Suho couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Was he simply becoming accustomed to this imbalance, to a life where he had no power or control? Thoughts of his missing parents and his reliance on others filled his mind, creating a deep void of helplessness. Memories of his mother echoed faintly in his heart, reminding him of her words about how much he resembled his father. Suho wondered how his father, a man he barely remembered, would have confronted such feelings of powerlessness. Lost in thought, Sung Suho's quiet introspection was interrupted by a voice that pulled him back to the present. His art teacher stood nearby, observing him closely. The teacher praised Suho's focus and asked about the subject of his drawing. Suho looked down at his sketch, a peculiar creation taking shape on the paper. It was an ant-like figure, but there was something inventive about its design, almost as if it had human features. The teacher noted this uniqueness, playfully describing it as an ant person. Suho, however, was left questioning why he had drawn such a thing. The image felt strange, almost as if it had emerged from his subconscious without reason. Meanwhile, outside the bustling streets, the scene at the gate unfolded with growing anticipation. Officials from the Hunter Association stood patiently near the entrance, their eyes fixed on the portal. The crowd murmured with excitement and relief as the hunters began to emerge. The squad looked calm and composed, a clear sign that their mission had been successful. One of the Hunter Association employees stepped forward to greet them, offering praise to Kim Jong-soo, the leader of the raid. Kim Jong-soo confirmed that the dungeon raid had been a success, but his expression was grim as he shared troubling news. During the raid, the hunters had encountered a new type of monster. These humanoid creatures emitted an eerie blue flame from their eyes and mouths. While their attacks relied on claws and fangs, Jong-soo noted that they weren't particularly powerful. He reassured the officials that the monsters posed little danger, even pointing out that he remained unscathed despite being scratched during the encounter. However, his tone carried unease as he emphasized the unprecedented nature of these creatures. Since the appearance of the gates, no one had seen monsters like this before. Their existence was a mystery that demanded attention, even if they didn't seem threatening at first glance. glance. The Hunter Association employee acknowledged Kim Jong-soo's report and instructed him to prepare a detailed account of the raid. As Jong-soo prepared to leave, he winced slightly, a deep cut on his thigh dripping blood onto the ground. However, something unnatural began to happen. Instead of blood, a blue flame started to glow from the wound. Jong-soo froze, his vision blurring as a sudden wave of unease overwhelmed him. The sword slipped from his grasp, clattering to the ground. The flame spread rapidly, surging through his body with an intensity that left him paralyzed. Before anyone could react, Jong-soo's expression twisted, and his form began to shift. The transformation was horrifying and swift. His human features gave way to something monstrous, his jaws widening unnaturally as blue flames poured out. In an instant, he turned on the nearest person, his body no longer his own. With terrifying speed, he snapped his victim's neck, the brutal act leaving blood gushing and the surrounding hunters and employees stunned. The carnage escalated. Jong-soo grabbed another hunter, his flaming eyes devoid of humanity. The hunter tried to warn the others, recognizing the blue flames as the same ones seen on the monsters inside the dungeon. But before the warning could be finished, Jong-soo tore into him, sending blood spraying across the chaotic scene. Panic consumed the area as the crowd, which had been gathered nearby, screamed and fled in terror. Cries for help echoed as people ran for their lives. The once organized scene descending into mayhem. Yet the nightmare didn't end with Jong-soo. One by one, the other hunters who had emerged from the gate began transforming, their eyes glowing an ominous blue. They turned on everyone nearby, their monstrous forms tearing through the Hunter Association employees without mercy. In the art class across the street, Suho was quietly drawing, unaware of the chaos, but the distant screams began to penetrate the classroom walls, their intensity growing louder. The students looked out the windows, curiosity giving way to fear as they tried to make sense of the commotion. The sight outside was incomprehensible. Hunters and civilians alike were consumed by the blue flames, their eyes glowing and their movements erratic. They attacked everything in sight, their monstrous instincts taking over as they ran wild in search of prey. The students in the classroom began to panic. Some recognized the signs, whispering fearfully about a possible dungeon break. Others froze, unsure of what to do. A sense of helplessness filled the room as they looked to Ta Lim, the only known awakener among them. But Ta Lim, an E-rank hunter, could only shake his head, his voice trembling as he admitted his own limitations. Sung Suho's gaze locked onto a terrifying sight. One of the monsters perched atop a nearby roof, its glowing blue eyes burning with malevolence. In a swift motion, the creature leapt down, moving with an unnatural speed toward the classroom. The crash of shattering glass filled the air as the monster broke through the window, its attack swift and merciless. One of the students fell victim immediately, struck down with terrifying precision. Chaos erupted, screams echoing as the others fled in panic. Suho, just as terrified as the rest, joined the stampede toward the exit. Amid the chaos, a girl became trapped beneath debris, her desperate cries cutting through the noise. Pleading for help, she struggled to free herself. Suho stopped, his body frozen by fear and indecision. He wanted to help, but the overwhelming dread held him back. Closing his eyes tightly, he tried to block out the sight and sounds around him. The weight of helplessness crushed him. Then suddenly he turned and ran. In his mind, he clung to the flimsy excuse that he would find someone more capable to save her. Outside, his thoughts spiraled into self-loathing. He grappled with the enormity of his failure, realizing he had abandoned someone in need. Guilt gnawed at him as he ran, his inner voice berating him for his cowardice. The curse of being unawakened felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of his limitations. A memory stirred within him, vivid and haunting. Suho recalled a dream he once had, one that mirrored the structure of a game. In that dream, he faced monsters that grew progressively stronger with each floor he ascended. To overcome them, he had to grow stronger as well, tirelessly fighting and leveling up. Each victory brought him closer to the pinnacle until he reached the highest floor. There, the final boss awaited, a formidable enemy whose strength was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. What struck him most was the identity of that final adversary. It was not a stranger or a faceless beast. It was his father. Though an enemy in the dream, his father stood as a symbol of unshakable power and resilience. Suho had always seen his father as strong and reliable, a figure who could overcome any obstacle. He wondered how his father had managed to attain such strength and questioned what he would have done in a situation like this. The answer was clear. His father would have acted without hesitation. Back in the classroom, the girl's cries grew weaker as the monster closed in. Its glowing eyes narrowed with predatory focus. She could see her death reflected in the creature's movements, her tears falling in helpless resignation. The beast lunged, its jaws wide open, ready to end her life. Just then, bam! A loud impact reverberated through the room. Suho had returned, wielding a fire extinguisher with all his strength. He struck the monster directly on the head. The force force of the blow sending it stumbling backward. Sung Suho stood frozen, his mind racing for answers. He knew the grim reality. The attacks of an unawakened, someone without mana, were useless against a magic beast. Panic clawed at the edges of his thoughts. What could he do? How could he fight back? But then something strange happened. The chaos around him stilled. The girl, the beast, the very air itself seemed frozen in time. Nothing moved. Everything hung in a surreal, motionless silence. Confusion clouded Suho's mind as he tried to comprehend the surreal scene. It felt as though time itself had stopped. A soft chime echoed faintly in the silence, drawing his attention. Before him, a notification appeared, its words clear and unmissable. The message congratulated him for completing the requirements of the quest, called Courage of the Weak. Before he could process this, another notification appeared, offering him the chance to become a player. The words felt like they had been plucked from one of his dreams. The dream where he battled monsters, grew stronger, and ascended through countless trials. The opportunity was too significant to ignore. The idea of gaining strength in a world where survival required power resonated deeply with him. Accepting the offer felt like the only choice. As soon as he made his decision, another message appeared, congratulating him once again. The system promised to help him grow, but warned that this was no dream, and he had only one life to live. New instructions followed immediately, assigning him his first quest: defeat the entity called Mistborn and gain strength through leveling up. The name burned itself into his mind as he felt a shift within himself. Time began to move again. The stillness dissipated as reality snapped back into motion. Suho shouted to the girl, urging her to run. The girl, now aware of her surroundings, scrambled to her feet and fled. Suho's vision sharpened, and he noticed details he had never seen before. Names hovered over the creatures ahead of him, identifying two unawakened and one hunter who had undergone a monstrous transformation. The creatures, now labeled as magic beasts, roared and charged at him with unrelenting ferocity. Sung Suho gripped the fire extinguisher, ready to confront the monsters closing in on him. Summoning all his strength, he swung the extinguisher with brutal force. The impact landed squarely on the nearest beast, sending it reeling. Without hesitation, Suho followed through, rolling his fist into a devastating punch. The strike connected with bone-crushing power, launching the creature upward until it slammed into the ceiling. Staring at his own fist, Suho was stunned by the strength he now possessed. The realization of his awakening was only beginning to sink in when another beast charged at him. Still processing his newfound power, Suho instinctively lashed out with a flying kick. The second monster crumpled on impact, its body smashed into the ground. As the chaos unfolded, notifications filled Suho's vision, confirming his progress. The quest was complete, and rewards were granted for defeating the Mistborn. A flood of satisfaction surged through him as he now felt sure of his transformation. Suho moved quickly to confront the last remaining beast. His fist collided with its face, delivering a thunderous blow. However, the creature barely staggered, withstanding the attack. For a moment, Suho froze in disbelief. His strength wasn't enough to take it down in one hit. The Mistborn retaliated, slashing its claws deep into Suho's chest. Pain coursed through him as he let out a guttural growl of agony. Gritting his teeth, he countered with a desperate kick, sending the beast hurtling across the space. His thoughts raced as he clutched his chest. The sharp realization hit him. If he suffered too much damage, he risked becoming a magic beast himself. Fear gripped him as he wondered if his awakening would be cut short by this grim fate. A notification interrupted his despair. It indicated that a harmful status effect had been detected, but neutralized by the effect of longevity. The term struck a chord in his memory. He recalled seeing it briefly in the status window earlier, though its significance now felt monumental. The Mistborn was relentless, rushing at him again. It tackled Suho, pinning him to the ground. His arms strained as he desperately blocked the beast's onslaught. Suho's mind churned with frustration. He realized his strength was insufficient to overpower a D-rank creature, confirming his own rank was likely no higher than E. As the beast's jaws inched closer, Suho's determination burned brighter. Desperation drove him to act. Scanning the system's interface, he noticed the option to accept his reward. Without hesitation, he activated it. The moment he did, a surge of power coursed through his body. His stats increased, and with them, so did his strength. Sung Suho let out a powerful roar, summoning every ounce of strength to push back the beast, pinning him down. The beast soared through the air before crashing to the ground, its glowing eyes locking onto Suho with a deadly glare. Unfazed, he lunged at the beast, delivering a devastating punch straight to its face. Blood spattered from the impact, but the creature barely faltered. Frustration gripped Suho as he realized even his enhanced strength wasn't enough to take it down. Faced with no other option, Suho accessed the system once more, pouring every reward point he he had into his strength stat. A surge of raw power coursed through him as his body felt lighter, faster, and undeniably stronger. Clenching his fists, Suho braced for another round. With unrelenting fury, Suho launched a relentless assault. Each punch landed with bone-shattering force, sending shockwaves through the air. He marveled at his ability, realizing that unlike other Awakeners who remained fixed in their ranks, he could grow stronger through leveling up. The rigid system of ranks that had always dictated power seemed meaningless in the face of this newfound ability. Fueled by rage and determination, Suho grabbed the beast and dragged it with him, plowing through walls as if they were paper. The sound of crumbling concrete and shattering glass echoed as the battle raged on. With each blow, Suho grew more certain of his power and his ability to overcome the seemingly impossible. Finally, with one last titanic strike, the beast collapsed, his body broken and lifeless. Standing amidst the debris, Suho's chest heaved with exhaustion and exhilaration. He clenched his fists tightly, his resolve unshaken. He had awakened, not just as a hunter, but as a force capable of changing the tide. Suho vowed to use his strength to save those in danger and put an end to the unfolding chaos. Just then, another figure emerged amidst the chaos, dragging a massive sword. The air grew tense as terrified onlookers scattered, their screams echoing through the crumbling surroundings. The figure leaped high into the air, landing with force on the building where Sung Suho stood. Suho, peering out of the window, caught a glimpse of the chaos outside and felt a momentary relief. He began to question the situation beyond the walls, but was abruptly jolted back to the present as the battle intensified. The new arrival, a C-ranked Mistborn, reached Suho in an instant, swinging its blade with devastating force. The impact reverberated through the building, causing the structure to quake and debris to rain down. Across the city, emergency announcements blared through speakers, urging civilians near the Korea University of Arts to evacuate immediately. Armed forces positioned themselves at strategic points, observing the destruction from a nearby high-rise. Tension filled the air as officers debated the situation, their faces grim. One officer expressed frustration, acknowledging the helplessness of their position. They could do little but wait for the arrival of a hunter strong enough to contain the threat. Speculation grew about the delay, with concerns over the infected hunters and whispers about a C-rank hunter potentially turning into a monster. All eyes turned to the data on their tablets, confirming the worst. The creature wreaking havoc was Kim Jong-soo, a former tank with C-rank abilities, now transformed into a Mistborn. Inside the building, Suho struggled to regain his balance after the impact. His thoughts raced as he processed the situation. The Mistborn had likely jumped from a lower floor, its strength far surpassing the creatures Suho had encountered so far. This one wielded a weapon and carried a deadly intent that set it apart. The Mistborn lunged again, its blade slicing through the air with terrifying precision. Suho narrowly evaded the attack, the sharp edge missing his neck by mere inches. He grabbed the fire extinguisher, his trusty improvised weapon, and braced himself. The beast, now fully in control of Kim Jong-soo's form, grinned maliciously. The Mistborn advanced relentlessly, swinging its blade with calculated ferocity. Suho attempted to block the attack with the extinguisher, but the monster's weapon sliced cleanly through it, splitting it in two. Smoke erupted from the shattered extinguisher, momentarily obscuring the Mistborn's vision. Seeing an opening, Suho made his move, darting through the doorway and vanishing into the smoke. As he ran, Suho's thoughts spiraled. Facing a C-rank Mistborn was beyond his current abilities. Even with his recent level up, the gap in power was glaring, and the reality of the ranking system sank in. Awakeners were divided into ranks for a reason. Desperation clawed at him as he pondered his next move. All he could do now was hold out and pray for the arrival of a capable hunter to end this nightmare. The beast, relentless in its pursuit, suddenly stopped. Its gaze shifted to a new target, its predatory instincts locking onto three girls standing on a rooftop nearby. Sung Suho followed its line of sight and froze in horror. The girls were oblivious to the immediate danger. One suggested waiting for hunters, clinging to the hope of rescue. Another reassured her that help would surely arrive soon, but the beast did not hesitate. With a single ferocious lunge, it closed the distance, its sword slicing through the air. The girls, paralyzed by fear, couldn't react in time. The creature wiped them out in one merciless strike, leaving behind nothing but silence and destruction. Suho's jaw clenched as frustration and anger boiled within him. There was no time left to wait for a hunter. He couldn't let this creature continue its rampage. Resolute, he charged toward the beast. With a powerful leap, Suho dropped an elbow directly onto the monster's head, aiming to disrupt its focus. The impact attack, however, barely phased it. The Mistborn turned swiftly, its blade slicing through the space where Suho had just been standing. Suho narrowly avoided the deadly strike, his heart pounding in his chest. The stakes were clear. One wrong move, one single hit, and he would be dead. But Suho couldn't retreat. He couldn't let this creature wreak more havoc. Summoning every ounce of his strength and speed, Suho launched a series of punches, each one landing squarely on the beast's form. Blow after blow he pressed forward, but the Mistborn countered with ruthless precision. Its sword swung in arcs, deadly and swift, but Suho managed to evade each strike by the narrowest of margins. Finally, Suho found an opening. With a burst of speed, he drove his knee directly into the monster's face, aiming to stagger it. Yet to his shock, the beast didn't budge. Its resilience was inhuman. Seizing the opportunity, the creature retaliated. The beast's blade slashed through Suho's torso, carving deep into his flesh. Blood poured from the wound as pain exploded through Suho's body. Before he could recover, the Mistborn delivered a brutal kick, sending Suho flying like a rag doll. He crashed into a wall with a sickening thud, the force leaving him barely clinging to consciousness. His health points were reduced to a single thread, leaving him teetering on the edge of death. Gasping for breath, Suho realized he had narrowly escaped the fatal blow, perhaps a strange mercy from the system that didn't intend for him to fall yet. The Mistborn loomed over him, its twisted grin widening in delight as it watched him struggle. Suho's body screamed in protest, but he forced himself back onto his feet. Blood dripped steadily from his wounds, painting the ground beneath him. His fist, trembling but determined, rose once more. He would not back down. Not yet. The sky above roared with an unnatural fury, crackling with streaks of dark lightning. As the Mistborn closed in on Sung Suho, its blade poised for the killing blow, Suho, barely conscious, clenched his trembling fist. His battered body screamed for rest, but he refused to give in. Just as the monster reached him, a single bolt of black lightning, darker than the void of space, tore through the heavens. A piercing screech filled the air as a figure descended through the chaos. The earth shook violently as it struck with devastating precision, halting the Mistborn mid-air. The impact was cataclysmic. The ground exploded in a shower of debris, the shockwave scattering rubble and dust in all directions. Suho, his vision blurred and fading, caught a fleeting glimpse of the being that had intervened. A massive form loomed amidst the settling dust, its silhouette unmistakable. It was an ant, a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. Overwhelmed, Suho collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The figure stretched its arms, radiating an aura of raw power. A healing energy flowed from its hands, enveloping Suho in a warm, restorative light. The figure's voice, tinged with sorrow, expressed regret for its delay. It was Beru, the Ant King. The Mistborn, still alive, rose again with a guttural growl. Shrouded in black steam, Beru's gaze bore into the Mistborn, his voice dripping with disdain as he acknowledged the enemy's audacity to harm his highness. Without hesitation, Beru moved. In a blur of speed and precision, he sliced the Mistborn clean in two, its torso falling away as blood sprayed in all directions. Elsewhere, Tae Lim, clutching a mop in desperation, faced a beast rushing toward him. Paralyzed by fear, he screamed for help. Before the beast could strike, a gust of wind swept through the space. In an instant, the beast was airborne, its boots the only trace left on the ground. Beru was a force of pure destruction. His claws tore through the creatures with brutal efficiency, faster than the human eye could follow. Each slash of his limbs ended another life, and the beast howled in agony as they were eradicated. The battlefield was a bloodbath, a testament to Beru's unrestrained fury. From a distance, police officials watched in stunned silence. The chaos that had engulfed the area was reduced to stillness as the last of the beasts fell. They could hardly comprehend what had just occurred. All they could see was a relentless tide of monsters being obliterated. Beru returned to Suho's unconscious body, landing gracefully beside him. His form loomed over the young man as he observed him with a mix of reverence and familiarity. The Ant King spoke, his voice carrying a deep weight. "It's been a long time, Young Monarch." Suho found himself in a vivid dream, a memory of his childhood. As a cheerful boy, his room was filled with sketches of dark creatures, his imagination running wild on paper. One sketch, an ant-like figure, caught his attention. He looked up, and standing before him was a towering ant. Fear gripped him as he let out a scream. The ant tilted its head, its voice filled with emotion as it gazed at the drawing. Tears welled up in its eyes as it seemed deeply moved by Suho's work, murmuring words of admiration and gratitude. Suho could feel the strange connection. revelation, but before he could comprehend it, the dream dissolved, his eyes snapped open, he was lying in a hospital bed, the sterile environment grounding him back to reality. Suho's mind raced as he muttered about the ant from his dream. The shrill ring of his phone broke the silence, pulling him back to reality. On the other end, a frantic voice questioned him about his condition and suggested hiring awakened bodyguards to ensure his safety. It was his uncle. Suho reassured him that he was fine. Though his mind wandered to the events that had unfolded, he realized 2 days had passed since the incident, and the events at the Korea University of Arts had become the nation's focal point. Television screens displayed news of the attack, reporters discussing the sudden emergence of Mistborns, creatures that could infect even hunters and turn them into monsters. The delayed response of the Hunters Association drew criticism, especially given the incident occurred in a bustling urban area. Accounts from witnesses added to the confusion. Civilians described how the infected suddenly burst and exploded without any apparent cause. Suho processed the unfolding chaos. His awakening was no dream. He was an awakened, one who grew stronger with each level, yet a nagging question lingered in his mind. He remembered the wound inflicted by the C-rank Mistborn, sharp and fatal. By all logic, he should not have survived. From the shadows, a voice broke through the silence. It was Beru. He declared that it was his intervention that had rid the area of the Mistborns. Suho jolted upright, startled by the sudden appearance of the creature. Tears welled up in the Ant King's eyes, his expression a mix of joy and nostalgia. He gazed at Suho with overwhelming emotion, marveling at how much his young monarch had grown. As Beru spoke, Suho's mind reeled. Memories began to surface, long-buried fragments piecing themselves together. Flashbacks of his childhood unfolded, visions of dark creatures who had once stayed by his side. Among them was Beru, his presence distinct and unforgettable. Beru explained the lengths he had gone to, crossing dimensions to reunite with Suho. Suho, however, remained puzzled. The memories brought more questions than answers. Why had he lived among such creatures as a child? Why had those memories faded until now? Turning his attention back to Beru, Suho noticed something unusual. The once imposing Ant King was smaller than he remembered. Beru, catching his observation, explained that the size difference was an effect of consuming vast amounts of mana while crossing dimensions. As Suho glanced at the system window, he noticed it listed Beru as a private grade entity. Beru, however, was less amused. His indignation at being reduced to such a rank was palpable, his frustration boiling over as he cursed the system with his characteristic flair. Getting out of bed, Suho moved with newfound energy, realizing his recovery was thanks to Beru's efforts. Beru admitted that his primary purpose was to release Suho's sealed powers, though he was surprised and impressed that Suho had begun to unseal them on his own. As Suho listened, a lingering question rose about the nature of the seal Beru referred to. Beru's explanation left Suho stunned. The dream he had was no mere illusion. It was a recollection of events he had lived. He was stronger now than he had ever been, even stronger than when he fought Beru in the past. Beru revealed that the Shadow Monarch, Sung Jinwoo, had sealed Suho's powers and memories, hoping to grant him a normal life. The revelation ignited a storm within Suho. His emotions erupted, and he grabbed Beru with trembling hands, his voice filled with desperation. Suho connected the dots in his mind, realizing Beru's link to his father, who had disappeared long ago. The truth unfolded as Beru explained the situation. Sung Jinwoo hadn't simply left. He had gone to outer space to fight a war against invaders threatening their world. These invaders, the Itarim, were gods of outer space, sending their apostles to Earth in an attempt to conquer it. Hearing this, Suho was overwhelmed. The idea of his father battling to protect the world felt both incredible and painful. Beru explained further that the gates and monsters appearing on Earth were likely a result of this war's influence. But Suho's thoughts turned to his mother, who had vanished the same day his father disappeared. He questioned if she was with him in this struggle, but Beru's sudden reaction made it clear he was unaware. The realization hit Beru like a thunderclap, his outcry reflecting his shock at discovering that Cha Hae-in was missing. Beru quickly deduced that the Itarim must have orchestrated a sinister plot on Earth, one that could have separated Hae-in from Jinwoo. The idea enraged Suho, that the Itarims were likely the reason his family had been torn apart. Beru's gaze softened as he asked if Suho wished to meet them. Suho's response was unwavering. Years of isolation and unanswered questions weighed heavy on him, and his trembling fists revealed the depth of his longing. Beru declared that there was a way. Sung Jinwoo, occupied with the war in outer space, could not return to Earth for the time being. However, Suho could grow stronger, strong enough to find and rescue Cha Hae-in himself. With that promise, Beru produced a key from the shadows. A system notification appeared before Suho, Suho, detailing his next challenge. The Trial of the Shadow was a quest to prove his worth. As the son of the great Shadow Monarch, Suho's immense potential lay dormant, locked away by the seal. To unlock it, he had to enter the Shadow Dungeon and overcome its trials. The key, an object of unknown rarity, shimmered faintly in Suho's hand. It was unlike anything he had seen before, designed specifically for use on his own shadow. Tentatively, Suho followed Beru's instructions, pressing the key against his shadow and twisting it. To his astonishment, the key sunk into the darkness beneath him as if it were a physical lock. A wave of dark energy surged outward, engulfing the room in swirling shadows. The air seemed to crackle as the space warped and shifted, and before him a portal began to form, a gateway into the Shadow Dungeon. Beru's voice carried unwavering encouragement, urging Suho to step forward and claim the power that was rightfully his. Suho stood at the threshold, his thoughts racing. The concepts of outer space, gods, and a war waged by the Shadow Monarch still felt surreal, like a tale woven from fantasy. Yet the weight of possibility pressed upon him. If there was even a chance to see his parents again, it was worth every risk. With a glint of determination in his eyes, Suho made his decision. He would grow stronger, no matter the costs. Beru stood in silence, a deep sense of purpose filling his mind as he remembered his last conversation with the Shadow Monarch. The memory was vivid. Beru had knelt before Sung Jinwoo, the Shadow Monarch, as the king's voice resonated with authority. Jinwoo had instructed Beru to travel to Earth and release Suho's seal, returning both his powers and memories. The Shadow Monarch, always calculating, had anticipated the possibility of the Itarim invasion spreading to Earth. His command had been precise, but left room for Beru's discretion based on the circumstances. Beru had accepted the responsibility with unwavering loyalty. If discretion was entrusted to him, then he would remain by Suho's side, ensuring the young monarch's growth and protection. Now Suho stepped into the portal, and his shadow seemed to come alive. It spread out in every direction, devouring the space around it like an insatiable force. The atmosphere shifted, and Suho began his journey into the unknown, with Beru guiding him through the unfolding darkness. They arrived in a world unlike any other, a land where shadows ruled. This was the Shadow Dungeon, a place where the living were not welcome without the master's permission. As Suho moved forward, the scenery revealed itself, a monochromatic expanse cloaked entirely in shadow. It was a world frozen in stillness, a ruined city now overtaken by an eerie forest of shadows. Suho's steps slowed as he took in his surroundings. The sight of the dungeon filled him with an odd familiarity, though he couldn't quite place why. It looked more like the remnants of a city laid to waste than a traditional dungeon, but something deep within him stirred at its sight. Suddenly, a system notification appeared before Suho, marking the start of a survival quest. The message declared that the inhabitants of the Shadow Dungeon would not accept him as their master unless he proved his worth. The task was to survive for 4 hours, with the timer starting immediately. As Suho prepared himself, a sharp sense of danger rippled through the air. Something moved quickly, slicing through the silence. His instincts kicked in as he sensed an attack from behind. A goblin wielding an axe launched itself toward him. Without hesitation, Suho spun around, delivering a powerful spinning kick. The goblin was struck mid-air, its frail form flung to the ground with a loud thud. For a moment, Suho stood there, slightly surprised by the sudden assault as the goblin growled and stumbled to its feet. Above the creature's head, a floating name tag read Goblin Scout. Suho quickly assessed the situation. If it was a scout, there was a risk of more goblins lurking nearby. Before the goblin could react, Suho dashed forward with determined precision. He knew he had to neutralize it before reinforcements arrived. The goblin raised its axe in defense, but Suho struck its hand with precision, forcing it to drop the weapon. Seizing the moment, Suho gripped the handle of the fallen axe tightly. With a single decisive swing, he brought the weapon down on the goblin. The creature crumpled under the force, its threat neutralized. Suho noted an important detail. The floating names above the creature's heads were color-coded, signaling their relative strength. But there was no time to dwell on this realization. A sharp, chilling sound pierced the air from behind. It wasn't just wind. It was a goblin perched high on a lamppost, blowing a horn. The call was unmistakable, a summon for reinforcements. Turning, Suho's eyes met the approaching group. The goblins emerged swiftly, their tags displaying more ominous titles: Goblin Centurion and Goblin Decurion. Their Their movements were coordinated, their numbers daunting. With no immediate help forthcoming from Beru, Suho prepared himself for the battle. The goblins charged ferociously, their snarls growing louder as they closed the distance. Suho tapped into his latent power, activating Ruler's authority. The axe embedded in the dead goblin's head quivered, and then shot back into Suho's waiting hand. In one fluid motion, he released it with a powerful swing, the blade slashing through the throats of 3 goblins in an instant. Their bodies collapsed before they could reach him. The sensation of control was surreal. Suho tested his newfound skill further, the axe floating mid-air, seemingly guided by an invisible hand. The power of Ruler's authority felt natural to him, as though it had always been part of his being. Suddenly, a swift movement from above caught Suho's attention. An arrow flew through the air, aimed directly at him. Reacting on instinct, he snatched the arrow mid-flight and turned sharply toward the source. Perched on a rooftop was a goblin archer, its bow raised for another attack. Without hesitation, Suho summoned a string of mana, forming it into a makeshift bow. He knocked the captured arrow, its tip glowing faintly with energy. Releasing the string, the arrow shot forward like a bullet, its speed and precision unmatched. It struck the goblin squarely in the head, ending the threat before it could launch another assault. From a distance, Beru observed intently, his gaze filled with admiration and concern. He marveled at Suho's adaptability, noting how the young monarch's childhood was reminiscent of the origins of a legendary hero. Even in those early days, Suho had wielded the ruler's authority, a power inherited from the Shadow Monarch, as if it were second nature. However, Beru reflected that such destructive strength had once been a hindrance in the peaceful world Suho grew up in. Now, with the apostles of Itarim invading Earth, this power had found its purpose, illuminating the darkened path of humanity's survival. On the battlefield, Suho moved like a force of nature, tearing through the remaining goblins with blinding speed. The creatures fell one after another, their defenses useless against his relentless onslaught. A notification materialized before Suho, its simple words signaling his growth: level up. Suho paused briefly, assessing his newfound strength. He gauged the limits of Ruler's authority, estimating the weight restriction to be approximately 10 kilograms. But his thoughts were interrupted by a sharp, searing pain. A goblin had managed to slip behind him, plunging its weapon into his back. Suho clenched his teeth as the pain radiated through him. The goblin, grinning triumphantly at its strike, was swiftly met with Suho's retribution. A powerful punch delivered squarely to its face, sending it sprawling. Beru's concern deepened as he called out to Suho, but the young monarch's focus remained on the immediate threat. Grabbing the embedded dagger, Suho began to pull it out, his bloodied hands shaking with exertion. The tension escalated as a larger figure emerged from the horde, a goblin centurion. Its presence was overwhelming, and its blood-red eyes locked onto Suho like a predator sizing up its prey. The centurion's aura radiated dominance, commanding the lesser goblins to renew their attack. Suho wrenched the dagger free, the blade slick with his own blood. His health was dwindling rapidly, but the pain only seemed to fuel his resolve. The goblins surged forward in a unified charge, their screeches filling the air. With fierce determination, Suho unleashed the dagger with immense force. A streak of lethal light, the weapon tore through the horde, carving a path straight to the imposing centurion. The blade struck true, plunging deep into its armored chest. As the creature's life force ebbed away, its commanding presence was silenced forever. As the remaining goblins faltered in their advance, Suho stood amidst the chaos, his breathing heavy but steady. He welcomed the thrill of the battle, a stark contrast to the powerlessness he once endured. For the first time, Suho felt truly alive. But the battle showed no signs of slowing. Goblins swarmed Suho from every side, attacking with unrelenting ferocity. Suho met them head on. 2 goblins fell simultaneously under his blade, their lifeless bodies hitting the ground. But the victory came at a price. Axes and spears flew toward him in chaotic arcs, some narrowly missing, while others landed with brutal accuracy. Suho's body bore the marks of the relentless assault. Blood flowed freely from his wounds, and his HP continued to drop steadily with each passing moment. Yet he paid no attention to the dwindling numbers on his status. His resolve burned brighter than ever. Every strike he delivered, every enemy he felled, was an act of defiance against his own limits. Amid the chaos, a notification appeared, breaking through the haze of combat. He has learned the skill, resilience, and leveled up. The tide of the battle shifted. As if on cue, the goblin horde finally began to dwindle. One by one, their numbers were cut down until none remained standing. The battlefield was silent once more, littered with the bodies of countless goblins scattered in disarray. Suho, bloodied and exhausted, climbed onto the roof of a derelict car, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. A notification appeared, breaking the momentary stillness. A reward for completing the quest. Suho accepted the prompt, his curiosity piqued. The reward details unfolded as it was a runestone with an ability of shadow extraction. The words caught Suho's attention immediately. Beru observed from a distance, his expression filled with a mix of awe and satisfaction. The shadow extraction skill would be another step in unlocking the young monarch's true power. Suho observed his body, reflecting on the transformations he had undergone. It seemed that his awakened state brought not just a level up system, but also the ability to gain skills as he progressed. A notification confirmed his thoughts, revealing that his resilience was exceptional. This enhanced his physical defense by 20%, further solidifying his evolution from an unawakened individual to someone with remarkable abilities. Suho couldn't help but feel like a character from a story with an unfair advantage, an embodiment of strength and potential. Beru, ever the guiding presence, explained that this leveling system was intricately designed to ensure Suho's growth and safety. He humorously likened Suho's situation to being born with unparalleled privilege. Suho acknowledged the observation, setting his focus on the new reward he had received. Another notification detailed the nature of his prize. A rune stone containing the skill Shadow Extraction. Suho absorbed the stone's power, learning the new skill. Shadow Extraction allowed him to transform the mana of expired beings into loyal shadow soldiers. The system highlighted the constraints of the skill. The probability of success depended on the target's stats and the time elapsed since death. For now, he could attempt this process up to 3 times. The realization struck Suho with immense clarity. He now possessed the ability to create shadow soldiers. Beru elaborated, describing the skill as the cornerstone of the authority that had once shaped Sung Jinwoo, the original Shadow Monarch. Contemplating this newfound power, Suho thought about its implications. The skill seemed akin to necromancy, yet it had its unique constraints. To command soldiers, he would need to hunt and gather their corpses, limiting his control to those weaker than himself. He considered the perceptions within the hunter industry, where summoning type skills were often undervalued, a fact that tempered his excitement with practicality. Determined to test the skill, Suho extended his hand over a nearby goblin corpse. The system prompted him to designate a command for the shadow extraction skill, a phrase to trigger the power. Suho paused briefly, pondering the need for simplicity and directness. With resolve, he settled on a single powerful word: arise. Shadows writhed and surged from the goblin corpses scattered around, as if drawn by an invisible force. The air filled with a sinister energy, accompanied by faint echoes of goblin laughter. 3 shadow goblins emerged, their forms cloaked in boiling darkness. They stood before Suho, silent and ready to serve their new master. Suho observed them closely, noting their diminished size and wondering about the limitations of his skill. Beru, ever the guide, explained that newly extracted shadow soldiers were typically weaker than they were in life, their size and power slightly reduced. This was an adjustment that came with the process, but Beru reassured Suho that the skill would prove invaluable as it evolved. Suho noticed another restriction: these shadow soldiers would disappear after a day. Beru expressed surprise, realizing Suho lacked a skill called Shadow Storage, a critical ability for maintaining shadow soldiers indefinitely. With a hint of disappointment, Beru explained that the intelligence stat and level influenced the effectiveness of Shadow Authority. Despite his initial sadness, Beru encouraged Suho, emphasizing that the skill would eventually become extraordinary with time and growth. Suho reassured Beru, appreciating his guidance, but shifted the topic to a more immediate concern: his hunger. Suho realized he hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the need for sustenance became his priority. He asked Beru how they could leave the Shadow Dungeon. Beru informed him that the Shadow Dungeon key allowed him to exit any time. Without hesitation, Suho activated the key, confirming his decision to leave. Back in the hospital, Suho wasted no time finding food. He savored every bite, marveling at how good the simple meal tasted. The nourishment felt like a luxury after the challenges he had faced. Beru addressed Suho with a sense of urgency, outlining the young monarch's responsibilities. Suho had 3 missions ahead of him, each critical to his role. The first was to protect Earth from the monsters emerging from outer space. This meant entering dungeons, hunting creatures, and growing stronger through the leveling system. The second mission was deeply personal, finding Suho's mother, Cha-haen, Beru reassured Suho that hunting outer space monsters would eventually lead to clues about her whereabouts. Though the path was uncertain, it was clear that entering dungeons was a necessary step for both the planet's safety and reuniting his family. The third mission carried a mix of humor and ambition. Beru, now reduced to a private-grade soldier, expressed his frustration at his current state. He longed to regain his former power, to stand as the formidable warrior he once was. To recover his strength, Beru needed to consume something infused with magic. Though the process was inefficient compared to the support he had once received from the Monarch, it was the only option left to him. For this too, entering dungeons became unavoidable. Determined to begin his journey, Suho decided they needed to prepare. However, Beru reminded him of the need to become a licensed hunter to access dungeons legally. This required undergoing a magic measurement test at the Hunters Association. Suho agreed and pondered the implications of his unique leveling ability as they headed to the association. He wondered what rank he might achieve, and considered the possibility of being classified as an S rank, a thought both thrilling and daunting. With resolve burning in his chest, Sung Suho took another step toward his uncertain future. The Hunters Association stood before him, a towering edifice that symbolized hope for many but now cast a shadow over his aspirations. The official's verdict came swiftly. His magic level was recorded at a mere 46, an E-rank awakener. Disappointment flooded through Suho as he left the building, his mind spinning with doubts. His dreams of protecting Earth seemed to teeter on the edge of impossibility. Outside, the voice of his loyal shadow companion, Beru, offered an explanation for the result. Beru noted that hunter ranks were determined by magic levels, and Suho's focus on enhancing his strength stat naturally left his magic level underwhelming. Yet despite the reasoning, the words felt hollow to Suho. Suho stared at his hands, once imbued with the formidable power of shadow authority, now feeling inadequate and empty. The question gnawed at him. Could someone branded as an E-ranker truly shoulder the burden of protecting Earth? Beru, ever a voice of reason, reminded him that progress was possible. Leveling up remained an option, but the path forward seemed riddled with obstacles. Suho had heard stories of raid parties rarely accepting hunters of lower ranks like his. Even gaining entry to a dungeon as an E-ranker would be a significant challenge. As despair threatened to take hold, an idea sparked in Suho's mind. His thoughts turned to the intricacies of dungeon raids, where each team played a distinct role. While the strike squad battled monsters at the front lines, the hauling team collected carcasses, and the mining team extracted resources from the dungeon's depths. Unlike the elite strike squad, the hauling and mining teams were known to accept hunters of lower ranks. This realization opened a narrow yet vital opportunity. Even as an E-ranker, he could find a way into a dungeon. The next day, determination outweighed pride as Sung Suho joined a mining team. The labor was grueling, demanding physical effort over combat prowess. It was a far cry from the glory of fighting monsters, yet it was a start. Suho owed his introduction to the mining team to Lim Do-gyun, a teaching assistant at the Korean University of Arts. Lim was the only awakener Suho knew personally, and he had helped Suho secure this opportunity. Lim, though a senior in awakening experience, was an E-rank just like Suho. As they worked, Lim couldn't shake a lingering guilt. He remembered the incident at the university vividly, a terrifying moment when magic beasts had appeared. Being the only awakener present, he had panicked and fled. The memory of leaving others behind haunted him. Lim found the courage to address his guilt, bowing his head in apology for abandoning everyone during the crisis. He admitted his fear and inaction, expecting judgment. However, Suho, with his characteristic understanding, reassured him. Suho reminded Lim that as E-rank awakeners, their priority was survival, following the Hunter Association's advice to retreat from magic beasts when faced with danger. Lim was taken aback by Suho's admission of his rank. The young man before him, who had shown such courage during the incident, claimed to have a mana level of only 46. Astonishingly low, even for an E-rank. Lim's thoughts raced as he recalled seeing Suho on the rooftop that day. In his mind's eye, Suho had been fighting the beasts while everyone else ran. Could he have been mistaken? The revelation only deepened Lim's admiration. It seemed almost impossible that someone with such low mana could have confronted magic beasts and lived to tell the tale. Lim's thoughts swirled as he worked, but his musings were abruptly interrupted. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Beru, Suho's loyal companion and shadowy protector. Lim's reaction was immediate and visceral. He stumbled backward, hitting the ground ground as fear overtook him. His voice trembled, barely above a whisper, as he gasped in disbelief. To him, Beru looked every bit like a dangerous magic beast. Suho turned to Beru, confusion flickering across his face. The sudden appearance of his companion, especially in such a public manner, caught him off guard, but Beru's explanation was simple. Until Suho regained his strength, he would not take any chances with the young monarch's safety. Lim, still trying to process the situation, managed to piece together an understanding of what he was witnessing. He speculated that Suho must have awakened as a summoner, given his ability to command such a creature. Suho, somewhat hesitant, admitted the possibility, though the specifics of his awakening remained ambiguous even to him. The conversation took a lighter turn when Lim compared their circumstances. Unlike many E-rank hunters who had no skills, Suho's ability to summon was undeniably advantageous. Lim, in contrast, had only one skill: enhanced running speed. Suho couldn't help but chuckle, teasing Lim about his apparent talent for fleeing danger. The jest left Lim momentarily speechless, his pride bruised, while Beru found it amusing, interpreting Suho's quip as a calculated mental blow. As the moment passed, Suho's gaze drifted toward the dark expanse of the dungeon's tunnels. Shadows danced along the stone walls, and the muffled sounds of the strike squad battling deeper within echoed faintly in the distance. Inside the dungeon, the carcass of a dead wolf lay sprawled across the ground, its lifeless body surrounded by the faint metallic scent of blood. The hunters moved cautiously, scanning the area with sharp eyes. The dungeon felt eerily empty, with only wolf-type magic beasts appearing intermittently. The strike squad's leader maintained an optimistic tone, urging his team to stay focused and reminding them that dungeons were unpredictable until the very end. The hunters grudgingly pressed on, searching every corner for any sign of value. One of them called out, drawing attention to a side path they had overlooked. The squad advanced, their anticipation building as they discovered a massive ruin hidden within the dungeon. Its towering presence loomed over them, casting an ominous shadow. The air grew tense as the hunters instinctively scanned their surroundings for danger, their hearts pounding with both excitement and unease. The ruin seemed devoid of life. Detection skills found no traces of magic beasts, leaving the squad puzzled. Was it a trap, or could treasure lie within its depths? The hunters debated their next move, the idea of hidden riches driving their curiosity despite the potential risks. Their attention was soon captured by a single striking sight, a sword embedded deep in the ground, radiating an aura of mystery and power. The weapon gleamed, its craftsmanship otherworldly, hinting at immense value. Two hunters approached it cautiously, speculating about its worth and discussing the possibility of traps. Their hesitation was short-lived, as Kim Yong-jin, a confident C-rank tank, stepped forward. He dismissed their concerns, assuring them he could handle any danger that might arise. Ignoring the squad leader's protests, Kim grasped the sword firmly. As he began to pull, a sudden shift occurred. A booming voice resonated within his mind, accusing him of coveting the weapon of the Monarch of Fangs. The atmosphere darkened instantly, transforming the ruins into a blood-red cave. Piercing eyes glowed from the surrounding shadows, filling the air with malice. Undeterred, Kim pulled the sword free, and the oppressive energy seemed to subside momentarily. The squad leader let out a relieved sigh, believing there was no trap after all. But the reprieve was short-lived. Kim's appearance began to change. His teeth sharpened, his body tensed, and his aura shifted to something primal and dangerous. Without warning, he turned on his squad leader. The gleaming blade in his hand slashed through the leader, cutting him down before he could react. The gruesome sight left the remaining hunters frozen in shock, their minds struggling to comprehend the sudden betrayal. The dungeon reeked of blood and fear as the floor grew slick with crimson stains. Kim's voice, twisted with feral intensity, echoed through the chamber, carrying the ominous command of a dark presence. His words resounded like a dreadful proclamation, the wrathful voice of the Monarch of Fangs. The hunters, frozen in terror, could barely comprehend the sudden shift. Their wide eyes filled with despair as realization dawned. Desperation overtook them as they tried to flee, but there was no escape. The Monarch of Fangs, completely in control of Kim's body, lunged at the fragile hunters. It was a massacre, swift, brutal, and merciless. Each strike from the possessed form was a testament to the overwhelming power of the Monarch's domain. Meanwhile, deep in the mining zone of the dungeon, the miners toiled away. chipping at the glimmering mana crystals embedded in the walls. Among them, two miners stopped abruptly, their attention drawn to an unusual sight. They exchanged confused glances as three shadow goblins worked tirelessly nearby, mining the crystals with inhuman precision and speed. Lim stared in disbelief. The efficiency of these creatures was unnerving, their movements calculated and flawless. He couldn't suppress his thoughts. He had heard of summoners bringing forth one or two creatures at most, but three? It defied all reason. Suho observed the goblins with a calculating expression. He mulled over the limitations of his new skill, shadow extraction. The necessity of corpses to summon shadows posed a logistical inconvenience, but the abundance of goblin remains in the shadow dungeon provided a convenient workaround. Beru hovered nearby, a faint aura of pride mingling with his characteristic deference. Suho remarked to him about the utility of the skill, noting how useful it was proving to be. Though Beru acknowledged the praise, he couldn't help but downplay it. The pride of a soldier and the modesty of a servant warred within him as he gently reminded Suho of his original purpose in the dungeon, to grow stronger and level up. Suho reflected on the rules of the Hunter Association. According to their regulations, E-rank hunters were prohibited from entering dungeons alone. The recent implementation of ranked assessments had its flaws, leaving room for errors. Suho had hoped for a reassessment once his mana reserves increased. Yet, this dungeon presented a unique opportunity, one that aligned with their third great cause. The cause was clear, the recovery of Beru's powers. Suho remembered Beru's earlier explanation, that consuming something with mana could restore his strength. The scattered fragments of mana stones in the dungeon, though small, held the potential to aid in this endeavor. Suho acted decisively, flicking Beru to the ground, signaling him to scavenge for the fallen crumbs. Beru complied without hesitation. He chewed on the shards of mana stones with an efficiency that belied their crystalline nature. Then, Beru stiffened. An instinctive warning coursed through him as he bellowed in alarm. The sudden shift in his demeanor startled Suho, who paused to assess the situation. Beru's warning was ominous. He had felt the presence of a monarch, though not the one Suho might have expected. If it had been their monarch, Beru's powers would have been fully restored in an instant. Instead, the presence carried the primal essence of beasts. The miners in the distance began to sense it too. Unease spread among them as growls echoed through the dimly lit cavern. From the shadows emerged red glowing eyes, piercing through the darkness. The beasts stepped into view. Wolves, their menacing forms radiating malice. Fear gripped the miners. Their legs trembled, and many collapsed to their knees, powerless in the face of such predators. One miner, desperate to defend himself, swung his pickaxe with trembling hands, but the wolf's jaws snapped the weapon in half effortlessly, leaving the man defenseless. But just as the beast lunged, Suho intervened with precision, driving a pickaxe straight between its jaws, stopping it mid-air. Without hesitation, Suho shouted to the miner, urging him to run. The man didn't need to be told twice and sprinted toward the exit, leaving Suho to face the advancing horde alone. Armed with nothing but a pickaxe, Suho glanced at the wolves, their tags revealing their identity as steel-fanged lichens, their names glowing orange, a clear indicator of their power. Suho assessed their strength, recalling the D-rank Mistborns he had fought before. These lichens were of a similar caliber, challenging but not insurmountable. Just then, Lim stepped forward, gripping an axe with trembling hands. His determination was palpable as he refused to abandon the others. Though reluctant, Suho allowed him to stay, commanding his summoned shadow goblins to protect Lim if danger arose. Suho searched his inventory and retrieved the goblins' weapons he had stored earlier. They were far superior to the crude pickaxe. Lim watched in disbelief, amazed by Suho's ability to summon even equipment, his mind reeling at the sheer abnormality of Suho's powers. With his weapon in hand, Suho planted his boot firmly into the ground and dashed toward the lichens. The beasts charged at him with ferocity, their jaws wide open, eager to tear him apart, but Suho met their attack head-on. His blade sliced through the first lichen with deadly precision, ripping it apart from end to end in an instant. The shadow goblins cheered wildly at their master's display of power. Two more lichens leaped toward Suho in unison, their claws extended for the kill. Suho outstretched his hand, commanding the corpse of the fallen lichen to rise. Dark shadows coalesced around the body, and in the blink of an eye, a shadowy lichen emerged. Ready to fight, Suho dispatched one of the attacking lichens mid-air with ruthless efficiency, while the newly summoned shadow lichen tore the other apart in a flurry of claws and fangs. Beru observed from a distance, his admiration for Suho growing. The young monarch had not only adapted to combat, but had also mastered the use of shadow powers with remarkable speed. As Suho battled the lichens, a thought took root in his mind. The process of extracting and summoning shadows didn't consume mana, but if he could increase the number of extractions by raising his mana, he could build an entire army. Determined, he decided to test the limits and add one more to his growing forces. Driving his dagger deep into the throat of a lichen, Suho commanded it to rise. The dark energy of his skill took over, the shadowy tendrils dispersing the goblins one by one. In their place, the lichens were pulled into his shadow army, their forms now under his command. Lim stood in stunned disbelief, struggling to process what he was witnessing. Suho's physical abilities alone defied the expectations of an E-rank hunter, but the skill that allowed him to control dead monsters, it was beyond comprehension. Suho realized his actions might have raised suspicion and quickly tried to downplay the situation, though Lim's thoughts were already racing. The sheer disparity between Suho's rank and his capabilities left him questioning whether Suho was someone intentionally misranked. Before the tension could escalate further, a notification appeared before Suho. An urgent quest had been generated. The message was clear: defeat the enemy that sought to kill him. Suho scanned his surroundings, confused. All the lichens he had seen were already defeated. Was there another lurking in the shadows? Footsteps echoed in the distance, heavy and deliberate. The sound grew closer, and from the darkness emerged Kim, a member of the attack squad. Lim, unaware of the danger, stepped forward anxiously, thinking salvation had arrived. Lim began speaking, his voice tinged with relief as he tried to explain the ambush to Kim, but Suho noticed something off. The faint red glow in Kim's eyes, a clear sign of something ominous. Alarmed, Suho tried to stop Lim, but the man moved too quickly, closing the distance. Kim's blade swung with ferocious speed, the attack meant to cleave Lim in half. Suho reacted instantly, grabbing Lim by the collar and yanking him back just as the sword crashed into the ground, sending debris flying in all directions. Regaining his composure, Suho issued a command to his shadow lichens, who charged at Kim with lethal precision. The wolves moved as a pack, their dark forms blending seamlessly into the shadows as they lunged toward their target. Kim, however, was no ordinary opponent. His form radiated a dangerous aura, and above his head, the tag Fang of Rakan, possessed, glowed ominously in deep crimson. Suho recognized the significance of the color. A red name was a mark of a truly dangerous foe. He recalled previous encounters with such enemies and knew the challenge ahead was far beyond ordinary. Weighing his options, Suho glanced toward Beru for answers. Beru's assessment confirmed the danger. Kim bore the aura of a monarch but fell short of their immense power. Still, Beru's warning was clear. This was not an enemy Suho could defeat at his current level. Suho accessed his inventory and retrieved every weapon it contained. The system's purpose was to aid his growth, and if this urgent quest existed, it must mean victory was possible. Suho resolved to confront the enemy head-on, knowing that defeating this foe could accelerate his path to strength, and ultimately, to reuniting with his parents. The battle began in earnest. Kim swung his blade with unnatural strength, scattering Suho's shadow lichens into wisps of smoke with each strike. Despite the ferocity of the attacks, Suho pushed forward, twin daggers in hand, searching for an opening. Beru watched from the sidelines, his gaze focused on Suho. Even in the face of insurmountable odds, Suho never turned his back on a challenge. He observed the young monarch's determination, noting that Suho's unyielding spirit reflected the true essence of a monarch. Beru's keen eye noticed something critical about the enemy. The possessed form of the Monarch of Fangs had a true form, a sword that was the source of its power. If Suho could sever its arm and separate it from the weapon, the enemy would be rendered powerless. With this insight, Suho altered his strategy. He poured mana into the shadow lichens, commanding them to reform and attack the possessed Kim from all sides. The lichens obeyed, springing to life once more. One of the wolves clamped its jaws around Kim's blade, holding it in place with immense force. Suho marveled at their resilience. His mana fueled their astral forms, allowing them to recover and fight regardless of how many times they were struck down. Beru, observing this display, felt a surge of pride in the shadow soldier's power. But the reality of the battle quickly set in. The shadow lichens stood no chance against the possessed form of the Monarch of Fangs. Each time they reformed, they were cut down in an instant. No matter how ferociously they attacked, the monarch dismantled them effortlessly. The frustration built as Suho questioned the supposed strength of his shadow soldiers. Beru, unshaken, reminded him that the limitation lay in Suho's current level of mana. It wasn't yet strong enough to fully empower his forces. The Monarch of Fangs, exuding an aura of arrogance and menace, bellowed in fury, questioning how someone so insignificant second could wield the power of the Shadow Monarch. Suho was stunned to hear the creature speak, its voice dripping with disdain, but Beru erupted with fury, shrieking in outrage at the insult to Suho's lineage. The monarch's tone shifted to curiosity and grim amusement as it acknowledged Suho as the blood of its ancient enemy. With a wild grin, it launched itself towards Suho, its blade gleaming with deadly intent. In response, Suho grabbed a goblin's axe from his inventory and hurled it with precision. The weapon sliced through the air like a missile, but the monarch's reflexes were unmatched. It shattered the axe mid-flight with a single swing of its blade. Suho wasn't surprised. He knew the challenge of facing a red name enemy. Just then, the monarch charged at Suho with its monstrous jaws wide open. Unflinching, Suho activated Ruler's authority, summoning every weapon within range and launching them toward his opponent. The air was filled with a deadly storm of blades, swords, daggers, and axes, all racing toward the monarch. The Monarch of Fangs, however, was too fast. It twisted and turned, deflecting and breaking through the barrage with ease. The ground around them was littered with shattered weapons. Beru watched closely, his keen eyes catching every detail. He recognized Suho's remarkable aptitude for Ruler's authority, a skill that had manifested in him even as an infant. The Monarch of Fangs charged at Suho, his movements feral and relentless. Suho gripped the goblin's axe tightly, bracing himself for the oncoming assault. The monarch swung his blade with immense force, shattering Suho's axe in a single, devastating strike. With his weapon destroyed, Suho was forced into a desperate dance of survival as the monarch unleashed a flurry of violent attacks. Each swing came with deadly precision, slicing through the air mere inches away from Suho. He dodged with every ounce of agility he had, narrowly escaping the devastating blows. It became painfully clear to Suho, if even a single attack connected, it would mean instant death. The relentless pace of the battle left no room for error. Dragging this fight out would only diminish what slim chances he had of victory. The monarch roared with derision, mocking Suho as he continued to evade. His taunts grew sharper, accusing the Shadow Monarch of cowardice, claiming that Suho too hid behind his shadow soldiers. The words stung, fueling Suho's frustration. Teeth clenched, he struggled to suppress his anger. He couldn't afford to let his emotions dictate his actions, but the insult to his father made his blood boil. Even though the provocation gnawed at him, Suho knew the harsh truth. His strength wasn't enough to fight this enemy head on. If only he were stronger. His mind raced, recalling an earlier conversation with Beru. Beru had explained why Suho's power from his time in the Tower of Betrayals hadn't returned. The seal placed on his abilities as an infant had only begun to release, and his current state was merely a reflection of the talent he had at that time. The strength he had wielded in the tower wasn't truly his, but part of a test to measure his capacity to harness such power. The physical might he had back then had been expected to disappear upon passing the trial. Beru had reassured him, though, that his experiences in the tower weren't meaningless. They had left him with something far more valuable: his instincts, feelings, and the indomitable fighting spirit forged in countless battles. Back in the present, Suho clung to the memories of his battles in the tower. The fire of determination still burned within him, a remnant of those trials where he had relied on his fists to overcome impossible odds. He clenched his hands tightly, wishing for the gauntlets that had been his lifeline during those fights. His thoughts shifted as he recalled a crucial detail. He could alter Beru's form to suit his needs. If that was possible, then perhaps... With a commanding gesture, Suho uttered, "Arise." Shadows surged, and the lichens rose once more from the depths, their steel fangs glinting menacingly. The Monarch of Fangs growled in frustration at the sight. Again, those creatures defied destruction. He raised his sword, his intent clear: to end Suho before this charade could continue. But then, something unexpected happened. Suho outstretched his arms, and the shadows of the lichens began to flow toward him, merging into his hands. As the sword came crashing down, a resounding boom shook the battlefield. Yet Suho stood unharmed. The monarch's eyes widened in disbelief as he saw his blade halted mid-strike. Before him, Suho's hands were encased in shadow-forged gauntlets, the steel fangs of the lichens now part of their deadly design. With sheer force, Suho pushed the sword back, forcing the monarch to stumble. Beru, watching from the sidelines, could hardly believe what he was witnessing. The Shadow Monarch's ability to transcend levels infinitely was unparalleled, but Suho, the young monarch, was still in the early stages of mastering his shadow authority. To think that Suho had instinctively discovered a new level of control over his shadows, merging them into weapons without guidance, was astonishing. Suho unleashed a relentless fury, raining blow after blow with his newly forged shadow gauntlets. Each strike landed with devastating power, forcing the Monarch of Fangs to falter under the onslaught. Finally, a thunderous punch sent the Monarch hurtling across the battlefield, crashing violently into the wall. Despite the impact, the Monarch rose again, roaring in defiance, its primal rage undiminished. Summoning the power of the ruler's authority, Suho called forth every weapon scattered in space. Swords, daggers, and axes swirled in a deadly formation before launching toward the Monarch. Suho charged alongside them, his gauntlets primed for the final strike. The combined assault was instantaneous and overwhelming. The Monarch's sword arm was severed, the blade clattering to the ground. The possessed form of the Monarch of Fangs was defeated. The battle at last concluded. Beru watched in awe, unable to contain his admiration for the young monarch. Suho's prodigious abilities were becoming undeniable, and Beru silently acknowledged the potential that had been displayed in this fierce confrontation. Suho, examining his shadow-forged gauntlets, reflected on the fight. He had been wary of the Monarch, its red name signaling danger, but it had not been an insurmountable challenge. This battle had taught him a new way to fight, a valuable lesson that he would carry forward. Turning his focus to the rewards of his victory, Suho found a runestone, Storm Slash, the power of howling winds imbued into a sword, capable of striking multiple enemies simultaneously. Suho immediately grasped the potential of this new skill. It was the reward he had most desired, and his instincts told him exactly how to wield it. As his attention shifted to the fallen sword, a malevolent voice seemed to echo from the weapon itself. The voice cursed its defeat, lamenting its humiliation at the hands of the Shadow Monarch's bloodline. Yet it warned of the insatiable greed of humans, claiming that anyone who wielded it would be consumed by their desires. Undeterred, Suho reached for the blade. As his hand closed around it, the oppressive red aura surrounding the sword cracked and dissipated, its defiance extinguished. A notification appeared that you have obtained the item, Ragnarok Fang. Suho studied the weapon in his grasp, its sleek design far superior to the crude goblin weapon he had used before. It felt powerful, resonating with a silent strength that seemed eager to be unleashed. The sword itself, or rather the spirit bound within it, reeled in confusion. It was inconceivable to the weapon that a human, even one with the Shadow Monarch's lineage, could resist its dominating influence. Testing the sword's power, Suho activated the skill Storm Slash. A violent storm of mana erupted from the blade, tearing through the surroundings with destructive force. The air howled, and debris scattered in every direction. The sheer destructive potential was undeniable, though the mana cost was steep. Beru, observing the display, couldn't help but compare it to the potential of shadow authority. He considered Suho's response to shadow extraction far too reserved in comparison to the awe-inspiring power of the shadows, a power exponentially greater than any single skill. Meanwhile, Lim began to regain his senses. As he looked around, he noticed Suho hastily shifting the sword behind his back, attempting to appear nonchalant. Suho greeted him, trying to ease the tension, though the scene around them told a story of chaos. Lim's gaze fell on the unconscious form of Hunter Kim, whose hand had been severed during the battle, and a wave of fear gripped him. As they stepped out of the dungeon, the warm sunlight greeted them, a stark contrast to the darkness that they had just endured. The brightness felt like a reprieve, but the weight of what had transpired lingered heavily in the air. Suho announced his intent to return to the dungeon to search for any remaining survivors. Lim, still reeling from the shock of the battle, agreed to wait. Left alone, Lim's thoughts raced. He couldn't reconcile Suho's incredible strength with his supposed rank as an E-rank hunter, a category reserved for the weakest of the weak. Even more baffling was Suho's summoning skill, a trait that should have kept him in the minor leagues. Yet here he was, a force of nature who had just rescued countless people. Lim decided it didn't matter for now. What truly mattered was that Suho had saved them all. As Suho ventured deeper into the dungeon, the number of steel-flanged lichens increased. Each encounter tested his growing strength, but he defeated them all, gaining valuable experience and leveling up further. Meanwhile, the sword in Suho's hand suddenly resisted, its power diminishing mid-combat. Suho questioned the weapon's behavior, only to discover its disdain for serving someone tied to the Shadow Monarch's lineage. The sword, full of arrogance, refused to cooperate fully, justifying its actions with excuses about attacking weaker foes. Beru Beru countered sharply, pointing out Suho's strength and how he had triumphed over the sword itself, a foe once much stronger than him. Despite its retorts, the sword faltered under Beru's logic, leaving Suho to internally remark on the absurdity of his companions. A talking insect and a sentient sword. As Suho ventured further, he searched for any survivors within the ruins where the chaos had begun. The air grew heavy as he approached the heart of the destruction. To his dismay, there were no survivors to be found. The devastation left behind was complete, and Suho stood in silence, lamenting the loss of life. The sword broke the quiet, boasting of its role in eliminating all intruders. It revealed its mission to guard the sanctuary of the Monarch of Fangs, taking pride in its actions. Frustrated, Suho plunged the sword into the ground, silencing its voice for a moment. A notification suddenly appeared before him, indicating that the shadow extraction skill could be used on the fallen hunters. Suho hesitated as Beru explained that any corpse, regardless of origin, could be transformed into a shadow soldier. Suho considered trying the skill, but stopped himself. Instead, he began to gather the bodies, preparing to take them to the surface. Beru was confused by Suho's decision not to perform shadow extraction. Suho, however, was resolute. Forcing these hunters to fight even after death felt like an additional punishment, one they didn't deserve. Beru cautiously addressed Suho, reminding him about the sword left behind. Suho, deep in thought, acknowledged the weapon but shifted the conversation. He questioned Beru about the sanctuary they were in, confirming that it belonged to a monarch. This brought him to a bigger question. His father, Sung Jinwoo, was also a monarch, but what about the others? Beru responded with reverence and clarity, explaining the intricate hierarchy of the past. He described that the Itarim were the current enemies of his king, Sung Jinwoo. However, the monarchs had been his previous foes. Beru elaborated, listing the 9 monarchs, each representing an overwhelming power. Sung Jinwoo himself was the Monarch of Shadows, the king of the dead. There was also the Monarch of Fangs, ruling over beasts, the Monarch of Plagues, reigning over insects, and the Monarch of the Iron Body, governing monstrous humanoids. Other monarchs included the Monarch of White Flames, leading demons, the Monarch of the Beginning, commanding giants, the Monarch of Frost, ruling snowfolk, the Monarch of Transfiguration, controlling demonic specters, and the Monarch of Destruction, ruling berserk dragons. Beru explained that despite their immense power, the 8 other monarchs had invaded Earth but were ultimately defeated. Each one fell to the unmatched might of Sung Jinwoo, the Monarch of Shadows. Suho listened in awe, realizing the extent of his father's legacy. The sword, sensing the direction of the conversation, interrupted with venomous resentment. It revealed that it had once served the Monarch of Fangs, the very being Sung Jinwoo had defeated. The sword seethed with rage, lamenting its current state. It declared that, were its power untarnished, it would have torn Suho, descendant of the Shadow Monarch, into pieces and fed him to the wolves. Suho stood firm, addressing the sword with calm but determined reasoning. He acknowledged its bitterness and understood the emotions behind its grudge. His father, Sung Jinwoo, had undoubtedly fought the other monarchs to protect Earth, while the sword had remained loyal to its mission of defending this sanctuary from invaders. Both sides had acted out of the desire to safeguard what was important to them. Yet Suho questioned the sword's logic. Its hostility toward him, simply for being the descendant of the Shadow Monarch, seemed misplaced. If its true purpose was to protect this place, why show aggression toward the one who could continue that protection, especially after its master had fallen? The sword reacted with indignation, unwilling to let go of its resentment. But Suho didn't waver. He spoke of his goal, to reunite with his mother and father, who were separated from him because of the invaders from another world. To achieve that, he was willing to draw strength from any source, no matter its origin. Suho pointed out the imminent threat of the Itarim, whose invasion would spare no corner of the world, including this sanctuary. He proposed a partnership, Shadow and Fang, uniting their powers for a common purpose. Grabbing the sword and pulling it from the ground, Suho made his stand. He offered the sword a choice: cooperation to protect this place, or continued hostility that served no purpose. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, a meeting unfolded in a quiet coffee shop. Lim Do-gyun, the lone survivor of the dungeon tragedy, sat with 2 reporters. They pressed him for details about the full squad's wipeout that had occurred in the D-rank dungeon the previous day. Lim, driven by gratitude and a sense of obligation, agreed to share the story. He hoped that this would bring recognition to Suho, whose efforts had saved many lives despite being an E-rank hunter. Later that evening, an article spread rapidly across the internet. It recounted the incredible story story of an E-rank hunter who had single-handedly rescued others from a deadly dungeon. The report included heartfelt interviews from those who had witnessed Suho's bravery firsthand and from the many lives he had saved. In the Black Tortoise Guild office, the staff gathered around, discussing an article that had quickly gained attention. The article highlighted the extraordinary actions of Sung Suho, an E-rank hunter who had not only fought off magic beasts in a D-rank dungeon, but also carried wounded strike squad members to safety. Lee Young-ho, one of the senior employees, brought up the pressing need to recruit new porters and suggested adding more E-rank hunters to the team. He shared Suho's profile, intrigued by the article's claims. As another employee read through the details, disbelief turned into amazement. The story painted Suho as a rising hero, someone whose courage and capability far exceeded expectations for his rank. Lee saw this as an opportunity for the guild. He reasoned that recruiting someone like Suho would create buzz and elevate the guild's reputation. The decision was made to contact Suho immediately. The following day, Lee eagerly asked if Suho had responded to their offer. To his shock, the response was a rejection. An E-rank hunter, new to the field, had turned down an invitation from the prestigious Black Tortoise Guild. Lee struggled to comprehend how a rookie could refuse such an opportunity, expressing disbelief and frustration. His colleagues speculated that Suho would realize the challenges of being an independent hunter and eventually reconsider. Suho's phone buzzed relentlessly, flooded with scouting offers from various guilds. His recent heroics in the dungeon had placed him in the spotlight, with many eager to enlist his talents. Beru, standing by his side, watched with quiet pride as his young monarch garnered such attention. Yet Suho felt no excitement over the offers. Most guilds sought to hire him as a porter or collector, roles that held little appeal for someone striving to grow stronger through the system. For Suho, joining a guild would only hinder his progress, and he saw no reason to consider it. Leaning back on his couch, Suho shifted his focus. His mind wandered to the Fang of Ragnarok, the sword from the ruins. He recalled the tense but pivotal conversation he'd had with the sentient weapon. Suho had boldly suggested an alliance between Shadow and Fang, an idea so unconventional that it had momentarily stunned the sword. Yet the Fang of Rakan had eventually agreed, on one condition. The sword demanded to be brought to another sacred ground of the Fang Monarch. Suho asked the sword if it knew how to locate such a place. The Fang of Rakan revealed that it could sense the locations of the sacred grounds, regardless of distance. However, the sword explained that one such sacred site's gate had already disappeared, likely due to what humans referred to as a dungeon break. This meant that the sacred site had turned into a field-type dungeon, a place where monsters had overrun the land after the gate's collapse, rendering it barren and dangerous. With determination, Suho decided to act. He sent a message to his uncle, reassuring him not to worry if contact became impossible, then prepared for his journey. Securing the Fang of Rakan on his back, Suho rose, resolute in his mission. Suho arrived at the Gwanak Mountain Field, a vast and silent expanse bathed in soft moonlight. The air was thick with anticipation as he gazed at the eerie terrain. This place was unlike anything he had encountered before, and he knew it held the answers he sought. As he stood at the edge of the field, doubt momentarily crept into Suho's mind. The location, owned by the notorious Hyena Guild, posed a challenge of its own. This guild, infamous for being comprised of former gang members, was not to be trifled with. Trespassing on their territory was illegal and likely to provoke dangerous consequences. Beru, ever vigilant, suggested that Suho focus on leveling up rather than dealing with unnecessary risks. But Suho had already made his decision. Gathering mana in his hand, he prepared to infiltrate the area. Using his skill, Ruler's authority, he froze the nearby CCTV camera, ensuring it couldn't record his presence. With a calculated squeeze of his fists, the camera shattered, leaving no trace of evidence behind. Beru, observing Suho's actions, couldn't help but draw comparisons to the boldness of Suho's father, the Shadow Monarch. With his path cleared, Suho leapt into the field. The area was shrouded in a dense blue fog that seemed almost otherworldly. The strange mist blanketed the entire space, obscuring visibility and adding to the field's ominous atmosphere. Suho wondered if all field dungeons were like this, filled with such an unnatural haze. Beru explained that the fog was mana from outer space, a force capable of breaking through dimensional barriers and rupturing worlds. The Fang of Rakan, ever aware of its surroundings added that this very fog had caused the dimensional rupture linking its sacred ground to Earth. The mana was both a source of power and a symbol of the instability that plagued the field. Beru explained that the entities from outer space were working to tear a massive hole in the dimension, allowing their armies to invade. However, the more mana a being possessed, the greater the difficulty they faced in dimensional travel. This meant the truly powerful foes would take longer to arrive. Understanding this, Suho knew he needed to act quickly. Every moment was an opportunity to grow stronger before the inevitable confrontation with more formidable enemies. Determined, he resolved to level up as fast as possible. Suddenly, the quiet of the field shattered as magic beasts emerged from the shadows of the bushes. The creatures revealed themselves: Daggerclaw Virga and Black Shadow Rajan, ferocious beasts with menacing presences. Their eyes glinted dangerously as they charged towards Suho. The Fang of Rakan, ever ready for battle, declared its eagerness to demonstrate its power, but Suho, confident in his strategy, decided otherwise. While appreciating the weapon's might, he made it clear it wouldn't be his primary choice. Instead, Suho prepared himself, formulating a combat plan. Drawing on his experience, he decided to base his fighting style on the hand-to-hand combat techniques he had mastered in the tutorial, enhancing it with ruler's authority for mid to long range attacks. He also planned to use a variety of weapons to keep his opponents guessing. As the beast closed in, Suho clenched his fist and delivered a crushing blow to one of their faces. The impact was decisive, sending the creature reeling. Without hesitation, he followed up with a flying kick to another beast's torso, demonstrating his agility and precision. Reaching for the Fang of Rakan, he activated his skill, Storm Slash, unleashing a torrent of destructive energy. The sword carved arcs of devastation through the horde, leaving no beast unscathed. Amidst the carnage, Suho devised an innovative approach. Utilizing shadow extraction, he began acquiring equipment and reinforcements from the remains of his defeated foes. To enhance his capabilities, he summoned his Shadow Gauntlets, a manifestation of his growing power. Beru, watching Suho's performance, couldn't hide his admiration. The young monarch's prowess was unmistakable. Meanwhile, the Fang of Rakan reflected on the spectacle, realizing the terrifying potential of Suho's lineage. The power of the Shadow Monarch's bloodline was undeniable. Suho's strength grew with every fallen enemy, and the longer the battle continued, the more formidable he became. It was clear why the Shadow Monarch's forces had been so feared in the ancient war. As the dead beasts rose again as shadow soldiers, Suho's arsenal expanded, adding to his ever-growing army. His intelligence stat had increased, allowing him to control up to 5 shadow soldiers simultaneously. Beru, unimpressed, couldn't help but draw comparisons to the colossal armies of the Shadow Monarch. His remarks carried a hint of disdain, and Suho, clearly bothered, nudged the ant to silence. Moving deeper into the field, they finally arrived at their destination. Fang, guiding the way, pointed to a spot that held significant meaning. It was here, he explained, that the gate to the sacred grounds had once stood. Suho stood at a vantage point, his sharp eyes scanning the scene below. The area was far from deserted, much to his dismay. Despite the late hour, there were still people milling about. Suho observed the activity with growing suspicion. He questioned their presence, noting that monster hunting was more practical during the day. His unease deepened as his gaze landed on an armored car rolling into the area. Near the gate, a group of guards stood on high alert, their demeanor anything but friendly. From the car, 3 civilians emerged, their hands bound and eyes blindfolded. The scene was unsettling, and the truth of the situation became clear. These people were captives, and their captors were anything but kind. Suho's attention was particularly drawn to one thug who roughly grabbed a girl's face, mocking her with cruel amusement. Suho's expression hardened. He turned to Beru for confirmation, his instincts already telling him what was happening. It was a kidnapping, plain and simple. Beru, cautious as always, advised against interference. As trespassers themselves, any involvement could jeopardize Suho's status as a hunter. The risks were high, and logic dictated they stay out of it. But before Beru could finish his warning, Suho was already gone. The young man's actions were rooted in his upbringing. With a father who had been a police officer specializing in violent crimes, and a grandfather celebrated as a legendary firefighter, Suho had grown up surrounded by examples of bravery and justice. These influences had shaped him into someone who acted first and considered the consequences later, especially when lives were at stake. At just 21 years old, Sung Suho carried the weight of that legacy, driven by a deep-seated sense of right and wrong. Suho launched himself into the fray with remarkable precision, delivering a flying kick to the back of the thug's head who was harassing the girl. The impact sent the man sprawling, and the suddenness of Suho's arrival left the onlookers frozen in shock, unable to comprehend where he had come from. The remaining thugs turned towards him, their expressions shifting from confusion to rage. Suho, however, realized something unsettling. He had acted on impulse again. Trespassing on another guild's territory was a serious offense, and his actions had complicated things. But instead of retreating, Suho quickly devised a solution. Using one of his shadow soldiers, he masked his face, taking on the guise of a mysterious hero. His transformation was complete. He now looked like a figure of justice, ready to confront the wrongdoers. The thugs, seeing Suho's sudden change, shouted in defiance. They grabbed whatever weapons they could find and charged at him with reckless aggression. Suho remained calm, his movements fluid as he dodged their attacks with ease. His flexibility and speed were unparalleled, and not a single strike landed on him. In his mind, Suho assessed the situation with precision. He had learned that the Hyena Guild's members were mostly D-rank awakeners, significantly weaker than him. With this in mind, he resolved to tone down his strength, ensuring that he didn't cause unnecessary harm. Seizing an opportunity, Suho hurled his axe with pinpoint accuracy. It streaked through the air like a bullet, bypassing two of the attackers and striking the third thug directly. The force of the impact sent the man flying back with such power that it seemed as if he had been launched into the sky. The other two thugs froze, their confidence shattered by the display of strength. Suho didn't let the moment pass. Using their distraction to his advantage, he unleashed a flying kick that connected with both men simultaneously. They crumpled to the ground with a deafening thud, completely defeated. From a distance, Beru observed the fight with a mix of pride and amazement. The ant marveled at Suho's rapid growth, noting how D-rank opponents, who would have posed a challenge to most, were no longer a match for the young monarch. After the fight, Suho accessed his stats window, his eyes scanning the details with satisfaction. He had reached level 16, marking his steady progress. Turning his attention back to the defeated thugs, Suho tied them up efficiently. Meanwhile, the now freed hostages approached Suho cautiously, their gratitude evident. They asked if he was a hunter from the Hunter Association, and Suho, not wanting to complicate matters, gave a vague affirmation. Assuring them that he would handle the rest, he urged them to leave for a safer place. With nods of relief, they departed. However, Suho couldn't shake his confusion. The actions of the Hyena Guild didn't make sense. Why were they kidnapping people? As he pondered, Fang spoke up, his tone carrying a sense of urgency. He mentioned feeling something, a reason for coming to this place. Suho, intrigued yet cautious, followed Fang's lead to a secluded area with a tightly closed shutter. Approaching the shutter, Suho hesitated for a moment before pulling it open. His breath caught at the sight before him, a grim and unsettling scene. The space resembled a prison, with cells lining the walls and an assortment of drugs and syringes scattered about. The oppressive atmosphere and the stark evidence of cruelty froze Suho momentarily. The reality of what had occurred here was horrifying. Steeling himself, Suho stepped closer, his thoughts racing. Could the Hyena Guild truly have gone this far, imprisoning people like this? Beru, standing beside him, felt a faint yet familiar energy lingering in the air. It was unsettling, raising questions about the true purpose of this place. In one of the cells, a faint sound caught Suho's attention, a soft whimper. He moved closer and saw a trembling form. At first glance, it appeared to be a dog, caged and frightened. Suho's heart sank further. What kind of operation had the Hyena Guild been running? But Fang, observing intently, corrected him. This was no ordinary dog. The creature was a young wolf, and not just any wolf. It was a descendant of the King of Beasts. This revelation startled Suho, and Fang explained further. After the Fang Monarch had been defeated by the Shadow Monarch, he had taken steps to protect his remaining bloodline. A loyal guard had been assigned to escort his descendants to a sanctuary, preserving the hope that one day another Fang Monarch might rise from his lineage. Fang admitted, however, that he had held no such lofty expectations. All he had wished for was for the bloodline to survive, for the descendants to live on in peace. Beru confirmed Fang's assessment, his senses detecting a faint trace of the Fang Monarch's energy within the young wolf, but its vitality was alarmingly weak, and Beru warned that if left alone, the creature would likely succumb to its condition. The decision now rested with Suho. Before Suho could act, the tension in the air shifted. His instincts flared, alerting him to an unexpected presence. Something or someone was approaching. Beru quickly assessed the situation, recalling the wiped-out forces outside. He had anticipated several intruders, but found only a single presence. Suho, frustrated by this oversight, prepared for another confrontation. His eyes locked on the source of the disturbance, and his confusion deepened. This wasn't a human, it was a monster. The figure emerged, exuding disdain for the defeated Hyena Guild, which had evidently failed to accomplish anything worthwhile. betrayal. The monster's voice dripped with contempt as it dismissed the humans as untrustworthy. Fang's recognition of the intruder was immediate. The monster was Brocky, the very guard who had been tasked with protecting the Fang Monarch's descendants. Brocky acknowledged Fang with a begrudging familiarity, his tone carrying the weight of time. Fang, however, wasted no pleasantries, demanding answers. He questioned Brocky's actions, or lack thereof, that had allowed the bloodline to fall into such dire straits. Brocky's tone grew sharp as he processed Fang's accusations, his disbelief giving way to anger. Without hesitation, he strode towards Suho, his steps heavy and deliberate. Suho observed the creature closely, quickly realizing that Brocky's movements were unnaturally fast, his strength formidable. With a growl, Brocky lashed out, claiming the young wolf from Suho's arms. His furious declaration accompanied a devastating blow aimed directly at Suho. The impact was overwhelming. Despite bracing himself, Suho was sent hurtling through the air like a missile, crashing through walls one after another until his trajectory finally ended amid the shattered remains of containers outside the desolate structure. Beru's voice echoed as he rushed to Suho's side, his concern evident. Suho, grimacing in pain, struggled to rise. The collision had left him battered, and blood trickled from a wound on his head. The sheer force of the blow had been unlike anything he had endured in recent memory. Beru pointed out the injury, but Suho dismissed his alarm, his head pounding too fiercely to tolerate Beru's loud concern. Wiping the blood from his brow, Suho tried to regain focus. Beru explained that the faint energy he had sensed earlier now made sense. It was unmistakable. It was Itarim's energy emanating from Brocky. The revelation sent a chill through Suho, even as he struggled to steady himself. Meanwhile, Fang's voice broke through the tension, demanding answers from Brocky. He couldn't fathom what the former guardian was doing to the descendants of the Fang Monarch. Brocky's response was chilling. He revealed that his strength, even after losing his sanctuary, had been sustained through grim means. He sneered at the idea of protecting the weak, asserting that survival of the fittest was the only law that mattered. The young wolf, weak and vulnerable, was not a charge to protect but a source of sustenance. Brocky had been feeding on the wolf's blood, drawn from the Fang Monarch's bloodline to sustain and enhance his own power. Fang was horrified, his disbelief giving way to fury as he denounced Brocky's betrayal. But Brocky, consumed by his twisted belief in power, mocked Fang. He declared that Rakan's death had been inevitable because of his weakness. Only those who endured, who survived at all costs, were fit to be strong. Fang moved with precision, his blade flashing as he slashed Brocky's hand, forcing the creature to release its grip on the young wolf. Blood dripped from Brocky's wound, the crimson staining his fur as he glared at Fang, astonished and enraged by the audacity of the attack. Beru quickly scooped up the young wolf, his presence looming as he muttered disdain for the unfolding chaos. The sword, seemingly alive, returned to Suho's grasp, its energy radiating a fierce determination. Fang, now brimming with anger, called out to Suho, his voice firm. Suho acknowledged Fang's fury, but made it clear that this fight was now a shared mission. There was something personal at stake for him too. With a glint of steel in his eyes, Suho declared an alliance between Shadow and Fang, signaling a significant shift in the battle's stakes. For Suho, this wasn't merely about survival, it was a step closer to uncovering the mystery of Itarim and ultimately finding answers about his father. Brocky, however, was not one to be intimidated. The insult of Fang's defiance and Suho's presence enraged him further. His growl deepened as he dismissed them as mere nuisances, vowing to kill them both. A notification appeared before Suho, presenting a new quest. It was simple yet foreboding. Hunt the hyena Brocky and secure your safety. Beru, observing the escalating confrontation, lamented his inability to directly intervene, his sadness evident. Suho's attention flickered briefly to the scene around him. The mention of Brocky's name brought clarity. The Hyena Guild, its monstrous origins, and the kidnappings, all of it pointed toward a connection to Itarim. This realization only deepened Suho's resolve to confront Brocky. As Suho and Brocky prepared to clash, a sudden voice broke the silence. The tied-up thugs, their fear palpable, screamed for Brocky's help. They begged for rescue, offering their loyalty in return. Brocky paused, his gaze shifting toward the desperate men. Their pleas echoed in the space, a pitiful sound that grated on Suho's nerves. Sensing the danger, Suho moved swiftly, determined to stop Brocky before he acted. But Brocky was faster. In a display of raw savagery, he widened his jaws and lunged at the helpless men. Before Suho could intervene, Brocky unleashed his fury, tearing through the thugs with merciless precision. Blood sprayed across the room, mingling with their agonized cries. The sheer brutality of the act leaving Suho Suho frozen in horror. The aftermath was chilling. Brocky stood amidst the carnage, his gaze sharp and unyielding, a predator reveling in dominance. Suho's shock turned to fury, and he launched himself into the air, his blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. But Brocky, unflinching, met the attack head-on, catching the strike with his bare hands. Suho's anger exploded, fueled by Brocky's callous disregard for life. The fight intensified as the two clashed. Suho questioned the monstrous creed that justified such senseless killing, but Brocky's response was chilling. To Brocky, power alone dictated who could live and who must die. Brocky delivered a devastating blow, sending Suho crashing into the stacked containers. Pain shot through Suho's body, but his resolve only hardened. As Brocky closed the gap, Suho retaliated, landing a powerful jab to his opponent's face. The impact was sharp, but Brocky barely faltered, retaliating with a flurry of strikes. Yet Suho's agility kept him one step ahead, weaving through the onslaught and countering with precision. The battle reached a fever pitch as Brocky dug his foot into the ground and launched himself forward, unleashing a devastating attack that shook the entire space. The air rippled with the force of his assault, and for a moment it seemed as if Suho had been overwhelmed. Brocky scanned the area, his predatory gaze searching for his foe. Then in a blur of motion, Suho descended from above with incredible speed. Brocky looked up just in time to see the blade flash. Suho's attack connected with a deafening impact, the fang activating Storm Slash and carving a deep wound across Brocky's chest. Brocky staggered, blood dripping from the fresh wound, but his rage only grew. He roared in defiance, mocking the strength of both Suho and the relic of the Fang Monarch. His arrogance left him vulnerable, and Suho seized the moment. The fang pierced Brocky's chest, its blade slicing through flesh with deadly precision. Brocky's confidence shattered as the weapon twisted, cutting deeper and severing his strength. Fang's voice pierced the tense air, heavy with sorrow and disbelief as he confronted Brocky. The once loyal subordinate, who had sworn fealty to Lord Rakan, now stood consumed by rage and betrayal. Brocky's expression darkened as he processed Fang's words. Memories of his past loyalty clashed violently with his present despair. He admitted, almost begrudgingly, that he had once respected Rakan, but that sentiment dissolved into an agonized denial. He grasped the blade impaled in his chest, his roar reverberating with defiance. With a guttural cry, Brocky ripped the fang blade from his body and hurled it to the ground, the weapon shattering upon impact. His rage spilled forth as he proclaimed the truth of his past. He had never respected Rakan. He had only knelt out of necessity, enslaved by strength he could not overcome. To him, the life of weakness was a nightmare he refused to relive. Suho's eyes widened as he saw the shattered remains of the fang. His attempt to speak was cut short as Brocky struck with devastating force. Brocky's knee connected with Suho's gut, driving the air from his lungs and blood from his mouth. In that moment of agony, Suho's thoughts turned to his father, fighting somewhere in a distant realm. The thought ignited a spark within him, a determination not to falter. Drawing strength from the shadows, Suho summoned his soldiers, their energy coursing into his arms. With a clenched fist and renewed vigor, Suho rolled his arm and unleashed a devastating uppercut. The blow connected with Brocky's jaw, sending the monstrous figure flying through the air like a missile, crashing far from the battlefield. The shattered remains of the fang blade lay scattered across the ground, faint traces of its power seeping into the air. Fang's consciousness stirred within the broken weapon, his thoughts heavy with the weight of the future. The survival of his successor and the legacy of the Fang Monarch rested on this moment. As Fang's awareness sharpened, his gaze fell upon the young wolf, injured but rising to its feet. The creature sniffed the air, its instincts alive and searching. Fang, inspired by Suho's indomitable spirit, realized the final gift he could bestow. Summoning the remnants of his power, he channeled it into the young wolf, his energy flowing like a tide of light. Beru watched intently as the wave of energy surged into the wolf. The transformation was immediate, the creature's form pulsing with newfound strength. It howled into the air, its cry resonating with the power of a true successor. Suho battled fiercely against Brocky, each clash of their strength echoing through the space. Despite his best efforts, Suho struggled to match Brocky's overwhelming power. His precise maneuvers and relentless attacks barely made a dent in the monstrous foe, who stood unyielding. The strain was evident as Suho's energy depleted rapidly, his health dropping to its final sliver. Yet even on the brink of collapse, he refused to yield. Suho clenched his fist, determination burning in his eyes. He had believed he was stronger, but the brutal reality of the fight challenged that belief. relief. As Brocky strode toward him with an air of disdain, the Predator prepared to deliver the final blow. Suho's mind raced, questioning if victory was even possible. Brocky extended his claws, lunging at Suho with a murderous intent. Suho saw the razor-sharp talons coming closer, the inevitability of his end looming. In that critical moment, a blur of movement erupted from the side. The young wolf, now imbued with newfound strength, leapt forward. With powerful jaws, it intercepted Brocky's attack, clamping down on his arm. The wolf's teeth sank deep into the flesh, halting the strike. Suho's chest heaved with relief as he watched the wolf's intervention. Brocky let out a guttural growl, pain rippling through him as he struggled against the creature. Blood seeped from the punctures in his arm, the wolf's bite unrelenting. As Suho observed the wolf closely, a series of notifications appeared before him. The system recognized the young wolf's actions as a display of respect for Suho's determination. The message asked if Suho would accept the successor of the Fang into his party. The idea caught him off guard. A mere baby wolf showing such potential? The realization settled in as the notification revealed the wolf's lineage, tied to the legendary Fang Monarch. Brocky's eyes widened in rage and recognition. The beast bellowed accusations, claiming Suho had absorbed the mana of Rakan's fangs. Suho pieced the situation together. The Fang Monarch's remnants had sacrificed themselves to empower their heir. It all aligned with his intentions to ally with the Fang from the start. Suho made his choice, and the system confirmed it. The successor of the Fang was now officially part of his party. As the bond solidified, a rush of unfamiliar knowledge surged into Suho's mind, overwhelming him momentarily. In a dark, ethereal space, Brocky appeared, seated beside the young wolf. His expression was solemn, burdened by memories of past failures. He reflected on their defeat in the war against the Shadow Monarch, a loss that had rewritten the rules of survival in their world. For the Fang to thrive, Brocky believed that the strength was paramount, and the heir had to rise above all challenges. He placed a gentle hand on the young wolf, a rare moment of affection, earning a fleeting smile from the creature. Suddenly, a shift in the atmosphere caught Brocky's attention. At the entrance of a shadowy cave, a group of peculiar figures emerged, their presence ominous and foreboding. Brocky's demeanor changed, trembling as he recognized the danger they posed. One among them stepped forward, addressing Brocky with chilling indifference. Without hesitation, the stranger dropped a glowing stone directly into Brocky's eye. Pain and confusion twisted through him as something sinister awakened within. The young wolf, witnessing the transformation, howled in terror, the sound echoing through the void. The strangers revealed their intentions with cruel precision. Brocky, now a pawn in their schemes, was tasked with capturing humans alive and delivering them. The thing implanted in him amplified his strength, but it came at a grave cost. It warped desires, turning them into tools of destruction. The young wolf, hoping for a similar boon, was struck with crushing disappointment. The power came with a sinister price, one that twisted everything it touched. Back in the present, Suho processed the flood of memories, piecing together the tragedy of Brocky's descent. These were not just Brocky's memories, they were the shared experiences of the Fang's heir. Suho realized the connection between the strangers and the sinister plots of the Iterim. The young wolf's determination wasn't driven by vengeance. It was fueled by a desperate attempt to save Brocky from the madness that consumed him. Suho's resolve hardened. If Brocky's madness was tied to the schemes of these mysterious enemies, then defeating him wasn't just about survival, it was a step toward uncovering the truth. But as Suho assessed his own strength, he knew he was still far from the power needed to overcome Brocky. Suho's vision flickered as a notification appeared before him. A new quest had been issued, tied to his recent recruitment. The quest, titled Monarch's Heirs, tasked him with finding and recruiting the heirs of the Monarchs as allies. The current status displayed 1 allied heir out of 8. Alongside this, another notification hinted at a unique development. A bond skill was forming due to his connection with the successor of the Fang. Beru observed intently. The experience Suho was undergoing was unlike anything seen with the previous Monarch. It was a transformation born of Suho's unique approach, something distinct and powerful. But Brocky wasn't going to stand idle. With a feral roar, he charged forward, his massive fist cocked back and crackling with raw force. As he unleashed the punch, the sheer power of the impact sent shockwaves tearing through the space, scattering dust and debris in all directions. When the dust settled, another notification appeared. The bond skill had been successfully created. Brocky's eyes widened as he realized his attack had been stopped mid-swing. Suho stood before him, transformed. His hair now gleamed white like that of a wolf, his presence radiating strength and ferocity. Suho had caught Brocky's wrist in an unyielding grip, his expression calm yet commanding. The system detailed the new ability of beast possession that by merging with the successor of the Fang, Suho could enhance his abilities, spending mana every second to gain the heightened senses and instincts of a beast. Brocky, refusing to accept the change, swung his other arm, claws extended, yet Suho moved with inhuman speed, dodging the attack effortlessly. With a newfound confidence surging through him, Suho countered. Bam! He launched a devastating sidekick under Brocky's chin, the impact reverberating through the arena. Brocky's head snapped upward from the force, leaving him stunned. For a moment, confusion and disbelief swirled within Brocky. This child, who had struggled to hold his ground earlier, was now overpowering him with ease. Fear crept into his thoughts, mingling with the desperation of what was at stake. Brocky knew that defeat would strip him of everything: his pride, his power, his very existence. Refusing to succumb, Brocky mustered all his strength and swung a massive fist again, determined to reclaim control. But Suho, emboldened by his transformation, blocked the attack with ease. Beru observed from the sidelines, his sharp senses detecting the change. Suho's mana had increased significantly, signaling a power surge. Brocky, however, refused to acknowledge the shift, his roar echoing across the battlefield. He declared the superiority of his species, claiming that the difference in strength between them was insurmountable and rooted in their very nature. Brocky's fist clashed with Suho's, the impact sending shockwaves through the air. Despite the force of the collision, both stood their ground, neither yielding an inch. Suho's vision lit up with a notification. He had learned a new skill, martial arts, level 1. Beru, now brimming with indignation, silently condemned Brocky's arrogance. Beru mentioned that no species could claim superiority over the Shadow Monarch, who reigned at the apex of all creation. Brocky began to falter, his eyes widening with sudden realization as he pieced together Suho's true nature. But there was no time to dwell on his revelation. Suho leapt high into the air, his movements imbued with the combined strength of his beastly senses and martial prowess. Channeling all his power into a single decisive strike, Suho brought his leg down in a devastating axe kick. The attack connected with Brocky's head, driving him into the ground with a deafening thud that reverberated across the mountain field. Silence enveloped the battlefield as the dust settled. Suho separated from the successor of the Fang, his transformation fading as he returned to his normal form. Exhaustion took hold of him, his chest heaving with labored breaths. Brocky lay sprawled on the ground, defeated and breathing his last. With his strength waning, Brocky's voice softened. His final thoughts revealed his desperation to grow stronger, his regret palpable. Memories of Sir Rakan surfaced, his anger stemming from his failure to protect his master. As life left Brocky's body, a notification appeared before Suho. Hyena Brocky has been defeated. You have leveled up. Beru acknowledged Suho's efforts with pride, praising the young monarch for his performance. Suho, however, was deep in thought, piecing together the recent events. He recalled Beru mentioning a strange energy from Brocky earlier and shared what he had discovered. Suho had briefly glimpsed the memories of Fang's heir and saw how hunters had inserted something into Brocky's eye during a dungeon raid. The action was suspicious and pointed towards a sinister purpose. Suho questioned whether these hunters were tied to the Iterim and wondered about their objective in targeting the wolf. Beru explained that the hunters were likely not direct members of the Iterim, but might have been their apostles. The outer gods seldom acted themselves, preferring to manipulate events through others to disrupt causality. He theorized that what these hunters had done could be connected to an impending invasion of their world. The realization weighed on Suho that the apostles of the Iterim were already on Earth. Beru, sensing Suho's resolve, offered a solution. He proposed devouring Brocky's corpse, which would allow him to access the wolf's memories of the Iterim. Additionally, it would help him recover his depleted mana, making the act doubly beneficial. Suho was taken aback by Beru's unique ability, but didn't dwell on it. Instead, he shifted his attention to the young wolf. The creature had endured much, and Suho felt a strong connection to it. Gently, he extended an invitation, asking if the wolf would join him on his journey. The response was playful and affectionate. The wolf licked Suho, its trust evident. Suho couldn't help but laugh at the gesture, feeling a sense of companionship form between them. With the decision made, Suho retrieved the key and opened the entrance to a shadow dungeon. Standing beside the heir of Fang, he prepared to step into the mysterious space. Before entering, he turned to Beru, entrusting him with the crucial task of uncovering Brocky's memories. Beru, deeply moved by Suho's unwavering confidence, vowed to fulfill his duty. In the depths of the Shadow Realm, Suho, Beru, and the young wolf walked through the eerie landscape of the Shadow Dungeon. Beru was curious and slightly perplexed as to why Suho had chosen to come here instead of returning home. Suho explained his intentions. He wanted to find a suitable place for the heir of Fang to live. He noted that the wolf had no guardian left, and its sanctuary was destroyed, leaving it in a pitiable state. As they ventured deeper into the dungeon, a notification appeared in front of Suho, prompting him to give Fang's heir a name. The wolf barked excitedly as if encouraging Suho to proceed. Suho took a moment to consider, then decided on a straightforward name: Gray, inspired by the wolf's fur color. The wolf seemed delighted by the choice, wagging its tail in approval. Beru, however, couldn't help but reflect that Suho's naming sense bore a striking resemblance to the simplicity of the monarch's own. Suho announced that the forest within the Shadow Dungeon would be designated as Gray's new territory, instructing the wolf to make good use of it. Gray barked in agreement, a sense of determination and pride emanating from the young beast. Suho then turned to Beru to inquire about what Gray might eat. Beru speculated that, as a descendant of Fang, Gray could sustain himself on living organisms or monsters. This revelation was a relief to Suho, who realized there were still monsters lurking in the dungeon that needed to be dealt with. Nearby, a goblin hiding in the bushes overheard their conversation, but Gray's predatory instincts kicked in. In a flash, the wolf leaped toward the goblin and devoured it with precision. Gray then turned his attention to other hidden goblins, swiftly eliminating them one by one. Suho observed the scene while perched on a tree, impressed by Gray's agility and skill. As Suho took a moment to rest, a notification for a quest reward appeared. He had obtained the title Wolf Slaughterer, which left him momentarily puzzled. He thought back to Brocky, wondering aloud whether the creature was actually a hyena. Beru suggested they overlook such trivial details. Shifting focus, Suho reflected on the broader quest objectives. The task was clear. He needed to locate the heirs of the monarchs and make them his allies. Beru began to elaborate on the modifications made to Suho's leveling system. He explained how, in its original design, the system was laden with ill intentions. It had been created to forcefully accelerate the growth of a human, Sung Jinwoo, with the ultimate goal of making him the vessel for the Shadow Monarch. This scheme, orchestrated by the architect, had sinister implications. Once the objective was fulfilled, the soul of Suho's father, Sung Jinwoo, was supposed to be eradicated. However, Sung Jinwoo defied the system's intentions, transcended its constraints, and became the Shadow Monarch through his own will. As a result, he ascended to a level where the system and leveling up became unnecessary. Hearing this, Suho reflected on his own journey. He questioned whether the system now existed to shape him into the next Shadow Monarch. Beru, however, reassured him that such a possibility was impossible. There could only be one Shadow Monarch in existence, and that title belonged to his father. Instead, Beru suggested that the system now acted as a guide, adapting to Suho's progress and helping him navigate his path. Any new functions or quests offered by the system were likely designed to aid him in achieving his own goals. Curious, Suho brought up his status window. He noted how much he had grown, recalling his time at level 1 when he was relentlessly pursued by the Mistborns. His stats had increased significantly since then, and he had acquired a variety of useful skills. Despite this progress, Suho admitted he still felt weak. The recent battle with Brocky, the heir of the Fang, was proof of this. If not for Gray and the unexpected appearance of the bond skill, he might have lost that fight. With this in mind, Suho resolved to clear the quests presented by the system, believing they aligned with his desires. Completing these challenges might eventually lead him to his parents. Suho turned to Beru and inquired about his earlier attempt to delve into Brocky's memories. Beru shared his findings, explaining that he found no evidence of Iterim apostles brainwashing Brocky. This was disappointing, as it left them without direct clues about the Iterim's involvement. However, Beru wasn't without insight. Within Brocky's memories were details of humans who had created the Hyena Guild to oversee Brocky and had been involved in rescuing kidnapped humans. Among those memories, a name stood out: Grim Reaper Guild. Beru suggested that this group might hold valuable information related to the Iterim. If they investigated the guild further, it could lead to critical discoveries about the mysterious forces that threaten their world. In the Grim Reaper Guild, a phone buzzed in a quiet office. Lee Min-sung, the vice CEO of the guild and an A-rank hunter, picked it up. On the other end was Lim Tae-gyu, an S-rank hunter who had recently left for Southeast Asia to assist with a raid. However, the tone of the call was far from cordial. Tae-gyu brought up a pressing issue, referencing a news article about the Hyena Guild incident. He accused Min-sung of being behind the events, suggesting that his involvement would not remain a secret for long. Min-sung, unbothered by the accusations, news, responded with sarcasm and dismissiveness, attempting to steer the conversation away from the topic. But Taegyu remained firm, warning Min-sung that his actions would catch up with him. He cautioned him not to underestimate the association or its chairman, who was known for his unwavering authority. Before Min-sung could respond, Taegyu ended the call abruptly. Fuming with rage, Min-sung smashed the table in front of him. His frustration grew as he reflected on Taegyu's audacity. Once merely his driver, Taegyu had risen to S-rank status, gaining power and confidence that Min-sung found intolerable. Still seething, Min-sung shifted his thoughts to the recent destruction of the Hyena Guild and the mysterious figure responsible for it. Survivors of the incident spoke of a young hunter clad in a black mask, but there wasn't enough information to identify him. Dismissing the matter, Min-sung decided it wasn't worth his time to focus on an unknown adversary. Reaching into his pocket, Min-sung pulled out a mystical stone that shimmered faintly in the light. This was Stardust, a hunter awakening stimulant, a substance capable of enhancing abilities and power. For Min-sung, it represented more than just potential strength. It was the cornerstone of his plans to elevate himself above scrutiny and criticism. If his business with Stardust succeeded, he believed no one, not even the association, would dare to look down on him again. Min-sung's ambitions burned brightly, but the shadows of his actions and the forces closing in around him hinted at a reckoning yet to come. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Until next time, happy watching.